Welcome to Dark Dialogue, the podcast where we dive into the darkest corners of true crime, unraveling the stories that shock, haunt, and leave us questioning the depths of human nature. I'm your host, John, here to guide you through a chilling tale that's equal parts mystery and tragedy.
And I'm Angela, your co-host, joining John to set the stage for today's episode. We're about to explore a case that's as twisted as it gets. The story of love, lies, and a deadly online obsession that claimed an innocent life. Get ready, listeners, because this one will keep you guessing until the very end.
Today we're stepping into the murky world of the early internet, where chat rooms created connections and deceptions that could turn deadly. This is the story of Brian Barrett, a young man caught in a virtual love triangle that ended in murder. Known as the Talhotblond case, its cautionary tale about the dangers of online anonymity stick with us because we're saving the biggest twists for the end of this one.
You're going to want to prepare for today's episode, so get your headphones, coffee, whiskey, whatever suits you, and settle in for a deep dive into craziness. Trust me, guys, this one's going to blow your mind.
So at the heart of this tragedy is Brian Barrett, a 22-year-old from Lockport, New York, a small, tight-knit town about 20 miles from Buffalo. Brian was a kind-hearted, athletic young man with an infectious smile, loved by his community for his dedication to coaching kids and his dream of becoming a teacher. Lockport, a quiet working-class town with a rich industrial history, was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, making Brian's senseless death even all the more shocking. Now, Angela, did you find us some details about the Lockport area?
I'm going to have to say here that no, I did not.
Okay.
Because when I was looking into Brian, it said Clarence, New York, not Lockport.
Okay, so that's actually where most of the events of this story would take place. That's
Clarence.
where he worked.
Yeah.
And so I can understand that.
So that's where, so he's forgiving me. Okay. It's on record. He's forgiving me. So the main events that we're discussing of this case take place in Erie County, New York, and more specifically Clarence and Buffalo. So I'm going to touch on a few reference points I found interesting in both places. I want to take a moment, though, to say to our listeners that if there's anything specific you'd like to know about the locations that I don't usually include, or if there's anything you'd like me to cut, please feel free to comment. Although John's going to witness my tears, it will cause me some heartbreak if cutting the census comparison is high on that list.
It's going to cause me some heartbreak, too.
Okay, good. So I think it's obvious that when people think Buffalo, New York, they think the Buffalo Bills NFL team, where our University of Wyoming boy Josh Allen is a quarterback. Just flexing a little random sports knowledge that I happen to have in my brain.
I think of snow.
You think of snow?
Yes.
I do too, a little bit. Buffalo is also known for Buffalo Wings, NHL's Buffalo Sabres, and its proximity to Niagara Falls. The Visit Buffalo Niagara site simply states that Buffalo is, quote, fun, historical, delicious, outdoorsy, sports-loving, diverse, and creative. It's home to remarkable art, music, and architecture, end quote. I think I said architecture wrong, but we're going to go with it. Buffalo.
I think you said it okay.
I'm always adding syllables.
You do that, yes.
I do not think words have enough syllables.
That's your thing.
It's my thing, yes. We're going to make words longer than they need to be. Buffalo is the second largest city in New York and is located at the eastern end of Lake Erie, at the head of the Niagara River on the Canadian border. It is the second most populous city in New York State, and yes, that will lead me into the census reporting.
Yay!
1,508 people in 1810 to the 2020 records reporting 278,349 Buffalonians. Yes, my friends, that is the Demon of Buffalo.
So I think that's the biggest growth that we've seen, isn't it?
Huge.
I don't think Myrtle Beach was that much, was it? Yeah,
No.
I didn't think so.
No. I don't think I've read anything in the 100,000s yet.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to, for those lifting an eyebrow at me, demonym is derived from ancient Greek, meaning people or tribe, and is a word that identifies a group of people, usually residents, in relation to a particular place. So that's why I said Buffalonians.
And I just learned a new word.
Yeah. Which one? Demonym or Buffalonians?
Well, both actually.
I am here to teach.
I see this.
You teach me all the things. I'm finally teaching you something. It won't happen that often.
Oh, don't sell yourself short.
At the start of the 20th century, Buffalo was the world's leading grain port and a national flour milling hub. Local mills were among the first to benefit from hydroelectricity generated by the Niagara River. Buffalo hosted the 1901 Pan American Exposition after the Spanish-American War, showcasing the nation's advances in art, architecture, and electricity. Pause for saying that one correctly.
Nice job.
Thank you. Its centerpiece was the electric tower with over 2 million light bulbs. I don't want to pay that bill.
It was pretty low back in those days.
Still, back in those days, the bill was still outrageous, probably. Anyway, at the exposition, President William McKinley was assassinated by anarchist Leon Zalgus. I pronounced that right.
Nice job.
Thank you. When McKinley died, that's not a laughable sentence. When McKinley died, Theodore Roosevelt was sworn in at the Wilcox Mansion in Buffalo.
Yes, he was. And do you know why McKinley died?
The assassination.
I mean,
well, yeah, technically.
But he died because the doctors were rummaging around in his stomach trying to get the bullet out, and he got sepsis from it.
Really?
Yeah, he was in such good shape that Theodore Roosevelt went on vacation, and then like 2 days later, McKinley died, so Roosevelt had to come rushing back so he could be sworn in as president.
Oh, wow. See, I throw these things in there because I know you like the politics.
I love it. And I just
then you segue into politic things. So
I just actually researched McKinley's assassination a couple months ago.
So it was fresh on the brain.
It is fresh on the brain.
So I will jump about 22 miles away, which, by the way, I cannot jump 22 feet, into Clarence, New York, as that is where the company Dynabrade Incorporated is located and will become an important part of the story later. The town of Clarence, New York is the oldest township in Erie County, dating back to 1808, just 25 years after the Revolutionary War. At one time, the town was inhabited by Native Americans and was called, I hope I don't butcher this, Ta-Numna Gawa, or Gao. Anyway.
I think that's pretty good.
Pretty good? We'll get there. Which means place full of hickory bark.
That's fitting.
Right? Due to the vast forest surroundings. Subsequent name changes occurred, including Ransomville, Pine Grove, Ransom's Grove, and Clarence Hollow before it became known as Clarence. The town had an identity.
A lot of towns did.
Right?
It's so interesting seeing how they came up with their names, how they changed their names multiple times. I mean, it was just a thing back then.
And they vote on it, and then they go back. Anyway.
Thermopolis went through that same thing.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
So originally a mainly agricultural area, today Clarence is a thriving suburban community considered the eastern gateway to the Metro Buffalo area. With a population of 3,278 people in 1820, it grew to a reported 32,950 residents by the 2020 census, and boasts the highest per capita family income of any township in Erie County.
Wow.
Right. With the discovery of a large deposit of gypsum on Roll Road, National Gypsum Company built a plant and began operations in June 1926. This was followed by Universal Atlas Cement Company, also on Roll Road. Roll Road was busy.
Apparently so.
And in later years, the Certainty plant on Krause Road. Apparently Roll Road said no.
Or it was full.
It was full. And that part may be only of interest to me because my dad worked in a wallboard plant for over 35 years. So I wanted to nod to him and throw that in there as soon as I saw gypsum. I was like,
White
oh,
Tex?
yeah. Well, no, it was Celotex.
Oh, it was Celotex.
And
that's what I meant.
And then it was BCP or BCB, and then it was Certainty when they closed. So when I saw that, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna flex a little bit and throw my dad in there. So another more recent-ish notoriety associated with Clarence is that on February 12th, 2009, Colgan Air Flight 3407 crashed. in Clarence Center around 10:17 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, killing 45 passengers, 4 crew members, and 1 victim in a home that was struck.
I don't remember that, I guess.
The memorial for Colgan Air Flight 3407 is beautiful, and it's located in Clarence City Center, New York on Long Street, near the site where the plane crashed. It's a place for remembrance and reflection, featuring a stone and wood bench, a large memorial stone with the names of the victims, and then there's a smaller memorial to the Wilinski home where the plane crashed. Today, however, we will go back to 2005, 2006, when Erie County experienced the very bizarre story that John will begin telling us right about now.
Perfect. Thank you, Angela.
You're welcome.
All right, so now that we have an idea of where this is all taking place, we need to understand the key players. And it's interesting. So this story has a few characters that we'll be discussing, but we're going to start by meeting 3 central figures in this deadly triangle. So first, there's Brian Barrett, the victim that we mentioned before. Then we have Thomas Montgomery, a dumbass whose online lies spiraled completely out of control. And then finally, we have Jessie, or Talhotblond, as she was known online. Now, Jessie is an 18-year-old who's flirtatious.
Flirtations?
That is the word, isn't it?
It is.
Jessie is an 18-year-old whose flirtations fueled a fatal obsession. So let's dive deeper into their stories. Brian Joseph Barrett was born in 1984 in Lockport, New York. A 2002 graduate of Star Point High School, he excelled in baseball and soccer, earning praise from his athletic director, Tom Sarkovics, as a gentleman who never complained and was always ready to help. Information about Brian's childhood and school years is pretty limited, as much of the focus is on the Talhotblond case and centers on the events that led to his murder. However, the available sources provide enough detail to paint a picture of his early life, character, and activities during his school years, particularly through accounts from those who knew him in Lockport, New York. So Lockport was a small working class town about 20 miles northeast of Buffalo. Lockport, known for its historical Erie Canal locks and industrial heritage, was a tight-knit community where families often knew each other well. Brian grew up in this close community, raised by his parents, Dan and Diane Barrett. While specific details about his early childhood are not extensively documented, it's clear from accounts that Brian was nurtured in a supportive environment that fostered his kind-hearted nature and community involvement. His family was involved in local sports, with Brian's father assisting with youth soccer, suggesting that Brian was exposed to athletics from a pretty young age. Brian attended Star Point High School in Lockport, where he graduated in 2002, like I said, and during his high school years, he distinguished himself as a dedicated student and athlete. Participating in both baseball and soccer, Brian's involvement in baseball and in soccer was a significant part of his high school experience. He was a talented athlete, known for his commitment and sportsmanship. His participation in these team sports likely helped him develop the leadership skills that later shone through in his coaching roles. His athletic background also fostered a sense of discipline and community connection, as sports in small towns like Lockport often serve as a social hub. Teachers and coaches remembered Brian for his infectious smile and genuine kindness. A letter from his teacher, Scott Bauer, read during a later sentencing hearing, emphasized Brian's dedication and his leadership, noting that he was a role model for others. Brian was well-liked, approachable, and someone who left a positive impression on those around him. His willingness to help others and his lack of complaints indicate a maturity and a selflessness that defined his character even as a teenager. While specific details about Brian's academic performance are not provided, his later pursuit of a degree in industrial arts education at Buffalo State College suggests that he had an interest in hands-on, practical learning during his high school years. Industrial arts, which often includes subjects like woodworking, metalworking, or technical education, aligns with Brian's patient and nurturing personality, qualities that likely emerged in high school as he engaged in activities requiring teamwork and mentorship. Even as a young person, Brian was deeply connected to his community. His involvement in sports extended beyond just playing, as he later coached Little League Baseball and assisted his father with youth soccer. These activities suggest that even during his high school years, Brian was inclined to give back, likely participating in community events or youth programs. His role as a coach showed that he was seen as a trustworthy and inspiring figure, qualities that were evident in his interactions with younger students or teammates during his school years. Brian's reputation as a gentleman and his active role in team sports imply he was sociable and well integrated into his peer group. Lockport's small-town atmosphere would have meant that Brian grew up in a community where relationships were personal and enduring. His later honesty and his online interactions suggest a straightforward and genuine personality that likely developed during his formative years. There are no specific accounts of significant challenges or hardships during Brian's childhood, but growing up in a working-class town like Lockport in the late 1980s and 1990s would have come with the typical experiences of a Rust Belt community. Lockport faced economic shifts as industrial jobs declined, which may have instilled a strong work ethic in Brian, reflected in his part-time job at Dynabrade Corporation while pursuing his college education. His aspiration to become an industrial arts teacher suggests a desire to contribute to his community by equipping others with practical skills, a goal likely shaped by his upbringing and school experiences. Brian's childhood and school years laid the foundation for the person he became, a young man admired for his kindness, leadership, and dedication. His tragic death in 2006 shocked Lockport, underscoring the impact that he had on those around him. The outpouring of grief from his family, teachers, and community members, as well as their efforts to seek justice through a petition of new laws, reflects the deep mark Brian left during his short life.
To give John a little break and a little breather, we have Thomas Montgomery that I will tell you about, and
He's
John
an asshat.
Call him an asshat, yes. Montgomery was born on June 3rd, 1959, and as is often in many of these cases, many specific details about his birthplace and childhood are not well documented in the available sources, which focus primarily on the events surrounding the murder of Brian Barrett. However, it can be inferred that Montgomery grew up in the United States, likely in or near Clarence, New York, where I got to tell you about, where he resided as an adult. Clarence, a suburb of Buffalo, is a middle-class suburban community in Erie County, suggesting a typical suburban upbringing in the 1960s and 70s. No information is provided about his parents, siblings, or early education, but his later roles as a machinist in... Is that right? Machinist and Sunday school teacher?
That's right.
Interesting mix. Indicate a working-class background with some community involvement. Montgomery was a former Marine, hoorah,
Hoorah.
though the specifics of his military service are limited. The Daily Mail notes that he used a photo of himself from his Marine days, taken approximately 30 years prior, around the mid-1970s, to pose as the younger Tommy in his online persona, Marine Sniper, which will make sense as this story goes on. There are no details about the duration of his service or his rank. However, he never saw combat and was not a sniper, as he later claimed.
He was a peon, worthless, maybe a private.
So we oorah'd for the wrong reasons.
We hoorah'd for the Marine Corps.
This is true. This is true. His military service appeared to have ended well before his marriage and career as a machinist. He likely completed a 4-year term of enlistment and then left the service. I'm going to say, was he dishonorably discharged?
He was honorably discharged.
He was honorably? That's too much.
Yep. Yeah, from all accounts, he was an average soldier. But it was after the Vietnam days and well before, any other engagements. So he liked to think of himself as like a war vet and all this really important stuff, but he wasn't. And not that, a Marine doesn't have to go to combat in order to be proud of their service, but this dumbass, he thought he did. I don't know. He's an idiot, but I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I'm fine. That's what we do. That's what we do here at Dark Dialogue. Thomas Montgomery married his wife, Cindy, in 1989. This places their marriage when Thomas was approximately 30 years old. No further details are provided about how they met, their courtship, or the specifics of their wedding. Cindy is described as a mother of 2 and a wife who believed she knew her husband until discovering his online persona, suggesting a stable, long-term marriage prior to the events of 2005 and 2006. The sources do not mention any previous marriages or relationships for Thomas before Cindy. Thomas and Cindy Montgomery had 2 daughters together. Poor things.
Yeah.
Specific details, not for Cindy, but for Thomas. Specific details about their daughters' names, birth dates, or ages are not provided in the sources, out of respect for their privacy as minors or young adults at the time of the case. By 2006, when Thomas was 47, his daughters were likely teenagers, given the 17-year marriage to Cindy, 1989 to 2006. Sources do not elaborate on their roles or experiences, and out of respect, I didn't dig very far, or John didn't dig very far, because I always cite credit here. The events of the story and Thomas's actions and subsequent arrests likely had a significant impact on the family. Before Thomas Montgomery destroyed so many lives with his internet nonsense is a very nice word.
Yeah.
He led a seemingly conventional life in Clarence, New York. Here's what is known about his life up to that point. Why do I always Captain Kirk?
I don't know.
Always channel Captain Kirk. Thomas worked as a machinist at Dynabrade Corporation, a tool manufacturing plant in Clarence, New York. This job suggests a stable, blue-collar profession requiring technical skills, consistent with the industrial economy of the Buffalo area. He was employed at Dynabrade and had been in his role for some time before the events took place in this case. Montgomery was a Sunday school teacher. I'm still struggling with that.
Yeah.
A detail that underscores his outwardly respectable persona. Yes, the cape, the wool over the eyes. This role suggests he was involved in his local church community, likely presenting himself as a family man and moral figure. Where's that bullshit button? There we go. His decision to engage in flirtatious online messages as Marine sniper was initially tempered by concern about how it would look, given his position as a Sunday school teacher, but he ultimately succumbed to the temptation.
Yeah, he did.
By 2005, Montgomery's marriage to Cindy was described as fraying, and he felt his life was mundane. His fraying marriage was more on his side than on Cindy's, but she thought they had a happy life at this time. At age 46, Thomas was restless, seeking excitement to recapture the vitality of his youth. He was experiencing what is often called a classic midlife crisis. Did he buy a red car?
No, he ended up becoming an asshat.
Well, okay. The dissatisfaction likely stemmed from the routine of his long-term marriage and career, prompting him to create the Marine sniper persona to escape his reality. Yeah. Despite these tensions, there is no evidence of prior infidelity or significant marital issues being publicized before the online affair. Thomas lived with Cindy and their 2 daughters in Clarence, a suburban town known for its quiet, family-oriented environment. The family's home was where Cindy intercepted a package from Jesse, air quoted there, in early 2006, indicating they maintained a typical suburban household.
So finally, we have Jesse Schuyler. The exact date of birth for Jesse is not explicitly stated in any of the provided sources. And for reasons that will become obvious later in the story, I didn't look very hard either. However, multiple sources indicate that she was approximately 18 years old in 2005, and that suggests that she was born around 1986 or 1987. Specific details about Jesse's childhood are scarce, as they focus on the criminal actions of the other players rather than on Jesse's early life. However, some insights can be gleaned. Jesse grew up in Oak Hill, West Virginia, a small town in Fayette County, as confirmed by sources noting her residence during the investigation. And Angela, I think you dug up some information on Oak Hill, didn't you?
Yeah, that one I actually did.
Okay, perfect. You want to hit us with that?
So I won't talk as much about Oak Hill, partly because there isn't too much to say, but it seems necessary to touch on it as that is where two of our key members in this case were residing or said to be residing while this case was unfolding. Oak Hill is located on the plateau south of New River in Fayette County at an elevation of 1,961 feet. Settlement in the area began as early as 1820, and population grew rapidly after the building of the Giles, Fayette, and Kanawha Turnpike by 1848. According to the records I found, it was incorporated in 1905. Although it is said to be the biggest city in Fayette County, Oak Hill hasn't grown much from what I gathered in my ever-present obsession with census records. Citing 764 residents in 1910 to 8,179 residents as of the 2020. A tidbit of fame associated with Oak Hill is that it is the supposed place of death of Hiram King Williams, known to most of us as one of the most significant and influential musicians of the 20th century, Hank Williams.
Yep.
According to his driver, Charles Carr, which I found interesting that his driver's last name was Carr. How freaking perfect is that? They had stopped at a gas station in Oak Hill while they were on their way to a concert on January 1st, 1953, and Carr unfortunately found Williams dead in the back seat.
What did he die of?
They did not say, and I didn't dig.
Morphine overdose.
No.
Yeah, he had all kinds of health problems, and he had terrible back pain. And so he went to the doctor and got a morphine injection, and then he stopped at multiple doctors along the way, because back in those days, you could just like swing into the doctor's office and be like, "Hey, doc, give me a shot of morphine." And he went too many times, and that's how he died.
Self-medicating. Got it.
Super young. I think, if memory serves me correctly, no.
7? I think he was 50s.
Oh, God, no. No. He was in his late 20s or early 30s at the very most.
Oh, no, it was in the 50s that it happened.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, on March 26, 2016, the city was honored with a historical marker to pay tribute to Williams' memory. So now that I've provided a glimpse into this town, John will segue us back into the case.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that.
Most welcome.
Jesse was described as a softball-playing high school senior in 2005, indicating she was athletic and involved in extracurricular activities. Some sources also mention that she played basketball, suggesting she was active in multiple sports. Additionally, she worked as a lifeguard, likely during her teen years, and these activities paint a picture of an active, community-involved teenager. Jesse was described as breathtakingly beautiful. As a high school senior in 2005, Jesse was likely attending a local high school in Oak Hill, though the specific school is not named. Her involvement in sports and lifeguarding indicate that she was engaged in typical high school activities. By 2006-2007, after the case came to light, Jesse was attending college in Virginia, suggesting that she graduated from high school on time in 2005 or 2006. No specific information about her childhood experiences, such as friends, hobbies, beyond her sports or academic achievements, are provided. Jesse's family life before the events of the Talhotblond case is described in limited but significant detail, particularly in relation to her mother, Mary Schuyler, and their relationship. So Jesse lived with her mother, Mary, and her father, Tim, in Oak Hill. Mary has been portrayed as a seemingly, quote, perfect mother who was close to Jesse, spoiling her and participating in activities like getting nails done together and shopping for prom dresses. And this suggests that they had a close mother-daughter bond, at least outwardly, before the events of this case. So Mary Schuyler was 45 years old in 2006. She was born around 1961. She's characterized as middle-aged, overweight, and, quote, tragically bored. She is described as having a victim mentality and would often lie, even as a child growing up. Mary would lie to get out of trouble, and her antics became a running joke within the family. Father Tim Schuyler, there's very little bit known about Tim beyond his role as Mary's husband and Jesse's father. No details about his occupation, personality, or relationship with Jesse are provided. I did see interviews with him, and he seems like just a super cool, down-to-earth, stand-up kind of guy that has no business being talked about on a podcast like this.
Oh, man.
You know, he was just a cool guy that went through a lot of crap.
Wrong place, wrong time.
Yep.
Wrong
Everything. So Jessie was the only child of the two, and therefore she has no siblings for us to talk about. And like we mentioned before the case, Jessie and Mary appeared to have a close relationship, with reports noting that they were, quote, a team and inseparable, engaging in typical mother-daughter activities like prom shopping for 2 dresses despite a tight family budget. And this suggests a financially modest but supportive household. So the insane events of this case began in the spring of 2005 when Thomas Montgomery was 46 years old. Montgomery, dissatisfied with how his life and marriage were going, and he definitely displays the victim mentality and was basically pitching a fit because he was a loser. And that's really what it comes down to. So sometime in early 2005, he created his online persona, Marine Sniper. So this poor crybaby was feeling restless and unfulfilled.
Aww.
And a lot of this was created in his own mind. He felt that his marriage was fraying, like we said, and his job as a machinist was mundane. He began craving excitement and a sense of youth, seeking to recapture the vitality of his early years. And I will say that even his early years seem pretty damn unnoteworthy as well. So while I did see it reported that he was trying to recapture his vitality, I think the truth was more like he wanted to capture excitement and vitality that he'd never had. He was born a loser. He lived a loser. He's always been a loser. And I think that's what's really at the heart of this whole story. I even heard him describing how he'd always wanted to be a Marine Corps sniper. And even when he was a Marine, he didn't pursue that dream. He could have become a Marine Corps sniper, but I mean, I've known people like him. It takes work. Exactly. I've known so many people like him throughout my life, and it's much easier to just lie about it and say you did it than to actually put in the hard work and dedication to achieve something. And that's what this piece of shit, that's what he did. That's who he is.
Because generally they come back to people who aren't in the military and can't find out that they're lying.
Yes.
So they get to spin these tall ass tales and their people believe it.
Yeah, stolen valor. And that's pretty much what this is stolen valor. You know, I mean, he was a Marine, but he didn't do anything special. He certainly wasn't a sniper. He probably went through the basic shooting courses and that was it. And then he probably worked as a cook or some boring thing like that.
Sniper with the arrow buttons on his keyboard.
Exactly. Yep. So I think that Thomas can best be described, like I said, as a loser with no real personal drive or ambition. And it was easier for him to just pretend that he had had some success in his life And if this moron would have just paused and looked, he could have seen that his successes were his wife and his family.
I'm going to pause and look and realize that the rest of this is going to get you going. So everybody refresh your
this
drinks.
Is true.
Get comfortable. John's about to take us there. Let's go.
So true. So, I mean, the guy is I don't know. Have you seen pictures of him?
Yes.
He's a dorky, dweeby little spag.
Yeah.
And he should have been lucky that he found a woman that was willing to marry him and bear his
Take
children.
Care of his every whim.
Yeah. And he should have just been happy with, I mean, from all accounts, he had a great life. He had a loving wife. He had 2 beautiful daughters. But he was just such an asshat that he just couldn't realize how lucky he was.
Kind of losery entitled.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
exactly.
Not entitled in the way that we see people being entitled, but
in another way.
Striving for entitlement.
Yes. So whatever his insane motivation, Montgomery created the Marine sniper persona to reinvent himself as someone younger, more vibrant, and heroic. He chose the identity of, quote, Tommy, an 18-year-old Marine in basic training preparing for deployment to Iraq. And this alter ego allowed him to escape reality.
You know, this also, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you again.
No, go ahead.
This also lends itself to how, what's the word I'm looking for, lazy he is.
Yes.
That his persona, he can't even try to remember a snazzier name. It's just Tom.
Right.
Not offending any Tommies out there.
No, but his name is Thomas.
But his name is Thomas. So he was just too lazy to even create a better persona than that.
Exactly. He's just an idiot.
Anyway.
So the alter ego that he created allowed him to escape reality. Through Tommy, he was able to escape from his perceived dull life, offering a fantasy where he could be admired and desired. By posing as a teenager, he could interact with younger individuals, particularly girls, in a way that aligned with his desire to feel young again. And as I've already said, Montgomery actually was a former Marine in the late 1970s. And so he used a photo of himself from his Marine Corps days to authenticate his persona. And he claimed that Tommy was a Marine Corps sniper, enhancing the persona's allure with tales of bravery.
That photo still wasn't like something to chase after.
No, I mean, he was
not in my mind.
He was a dweeby little dude. He really was.
I'm not going to speak for all women, but I'm going to speak for a vast majority of them that no.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, he was a dweeby little dude. That's just all there is to it.
That's all I have to say.
Montgomery created this new online persona on a platform called Pogo.com. So Pogo is still on the web as a gaming website. And so for our younger listeners, in the early days of the internet, chat rooms were huge. They were
ancient dinosaurs.
Yes, they were the thing. And chat rooms are online platforms where users can engage in real-time text-based conversation with others, often grouped by shared interests like games or demographics. They were extremely popular in the late 1990s and the early 2000s, the early days of the internet. And they provided an anonymous space for social interaction, ranging from casual banter to deep discussions. And they were on sites like Pogo, AOL, and Yahoo, which was huge back in those days.
I mean, guilty, but I didn't do this.
No, but I did chat rooms. I think all of us did.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really an experience because coming out of the era before cell phones and internet, I mean, if you wanted to talk to somebody, you had to make a long distance phone call, which was expensive as hell, if you remember.
And sadly, and I don't know if anybody else feels this way, you could only talk to one person at a time. I don't like phone calls as much because I can only talk to one person at a time.
Yep, that's very true. it was a different world. And so when the internet came around and you were able to jump on there and talk to people from literally all over the world, it was really something. I mean, it was life-changing for all of us. And so users... Good and bad, absolutely. Users typically adopted screen names, allowing them to conceal their identities, which fostered both connection and deception. And in the context of this case, chat rooms on Pogo enabled Thomas Montgomery and Talhotblond to meet. By choosing Pogo, Montgomery entered a seemingly innocuous space to engage with others, and he initially was hesitant to flirt due to his role as a Sunday school teacher. However, that was quickly overcome by the temptation of the online anonymity that he was experiencing. So, after creating his online persona and screen name, Marine Sniper, Montgomery was active in children's gaming chat room on Pogo.
Children's, wonderful.
Yeah, it was geared towards like young adults, teenagers. It was really how it was geared. And I'm not saying that as an excuse. And so he was in that chat room when he received a message from screen name Talhotblond, who introduced herself as Jessie, an 18-year-old high school senior from West Virginia. And the initial contact by Jessie, it wasn't detailed extensively as far as the exact words or anything, but we do know that she initially asked him why he was in a children's chat room. And Montgomery was initially worried and claimed that he didn't know it was for children. But Talhotblond responded in a joking and flirtatious manner, which set the tone for the rest of their interactions.
As we said, the Talhotblond persona told Montgomery that she was Jessie, a vivacious, attractive 18-year-old with blonde hair. She told him how she was involved in softball and basketball and was working as a lifeguard. She sent photos of herself, some where she was scantily clad, and they were obviously meant to be.
So the interaction between Marine Sniper and Talhotblond quickly escalated from casual banter to an intense online romance. Montgomery, as Tommy, described himself as 6 feet tall with red hair, broad shoulders, and a muscular build, contrasting his real-life appearance as a middle-aged, balding, fat, short, stocky man with thinning hair. I mean, he wasn't like fat, but he was chub. He was, like a dad bod type thing. And,
But not in a good way. There are good dad bods.
Yeah.
This was not one of them.
He just, if you haven't seen pictures of him, look him up because he's a dorky little guy. And he wove tales of being a Marine in basic training, enhancing his appeal with the heroic narrative.
He's like George Costanza's better than this guy.
Yes, definitely. But that he is in that same vein,
right? That's what I see.
Yes. So the two exchanged love letters, explicit messages, and engaged in virtual sex through the Pogo chat platform. So think of sexting before texting was really a thing. I'm not going to say that texting didn't exist in 2005, but it took a hell of a lot more effort.
Sure did.
Because you had to like push one number
T9.
3 times or what. Yeah, it was a nightmare. So all your messages were really short back then. So there wasn't a lot of sexting going on back in those days.
Because T9 just was not the fun thing.
Yes.
I still can't use T9.
It's a nightmare.
So you don't have to.
This online relationship between Tommy and Jessie moved really fast, and it wasn't long before Jessie was sending messages such as, "I love you always and forever, Tommy." And this just threw fuel on the fire of Montgomery's obsession. She also sent him physical gifts, including her underwear, which served to deepen the connection. Tommy got around the whole address issue by introducing his father, Thomas.
Yeah.
And his dad then would act as the go-between to make sure that he was able to receive his gifts. And he explained this to her by saying that he couldn't share his address because of the sensitive nature of his assignment, with him being in Iraq by this point.
007.
Yeah, and Montgomery became addicted to the relationship, later admitting that it became more real to me than real life. That was a quote. It became more real to me than real life. And so I didn't include it in the script, but in a documentary I watched about this case, Tommy would be like out on patrol in Iraq and somehow messaging her through his chat rooms and stuff. I mean, it was insane.
I had friends over there. You didn't hear from them for
no, they were packing computers around. I mean, they're not taking over villages in Iraq and, getting
setting
on
up their
chat
Pogo
rooms.
accounts.
Yeah. So, but by early 2006, Montgomery's relationship with Jesse had intensified, involving love letters, explicit messages, frequent virtual sex, and physical gifts, like we said, her underwear. And this stuff was being sent to his home. The depth of the virtual romance, which he describes as, quote, like a drug, likely created psychological strains on this already psychological dysfunctional creep. And maintaining the Tommy persona and claiming to be an 18-year-old Marine sniper in basic training or now deployed to Iraq required him to constantly be fabricating, especially as Jesse pressed for details and photos. And so Montgomery later claimed that he began to feel guilty over deceiving somebody that was over 18 and someone that he believed he loved. I think it's all bullshit. I don't think the guy felt any guilt at all. I think he's more like a sociopath that actually can't feel guilt. But this, coupled with the fear that his lies might be exposed, finally prodded him into a partial confession that he was not a sniper and was actually older than 18. So at this time, he admitted to being older, but he did not fully disclose his true age of 46 and definitely not his marital status. Yeah, we'd lie, just partially lie. Somehow that makes it better for a Sunday school. I don't think they teach that in Sunday school.
Haven't been in a long time, but not.
I don't remember them saying, if it's only a little light, it's okay.
Little white lies.
I don't remember that part. But
yeah.
He was still clinging to this modified version of the Tommy persona. So
Jesse's response to Montgomery's partial confession was complex, marked by a mix of mild frustration, continued flirtation, and strategic manipulation. When Montgomery admitted he was not a sniper and was older than 18, Jesse expressed mild frustration or disappointment at his deception. She said she was upset that he had lied about being a young Marine sniper, key part of the heroic persona that drew her to Tommy. However, her reaction was not severe enough to end the relationship, suggesting she was willing to overlook the falsehood to keep the connection alive. Unlike what might be expected if she truly believed she was interacting with an 18-year-old, Jessie did not cut off contact. Instead, she continued to engage with Montgomery and soon resumed sending flirty and romantic messages, maintaining the emotional intensity of their relationship. One of these messages reads, quote, "I ache to be with Tommy," end quote. This message came after learning he wasn't the sniper he claimed. Jesse also continued to send provocative photos and engage in explicit chats. Brown chicken, brown cow. Her willingness to deepen the relationship, despite his confession, indicates a strategic choice to maintain control over Montgomery, possibly enjoying the power dynamics of their interaction. It also shows how disconnected from reality Montgomery was.
So, following his partial confession, Montgomery's obsession deepened even more. It's hard to believe that was even possible, but it did. So,
I'm saying brown chicken, brown cow.
Yeah. So this
I had to get that in there somewhere.
Absolutely.
Right?
This is evidenced by a note that he wrote to himself on January 2nd.
Himself?
Yes. January 2nd, 2006. So this nutball wrote, Tom Montgomery, 46 years old, ceases to exist and is replaced by an 18-year-old battle-scarred Marine. He is moving to West Virginia to be with the love of his life. And this note was later found by investigators, and it reveals his delusion that he could abandon his real life for Jesse, his increased time spent online on the family computer, and the physical gifts arriving at their home created a huge risk of exposure. And again, for the younger people that are listening, this was common back then. Like, computers were freaking expensive when they first came out. A lot of people saved up and bought a one family computer, usually located centrally in the house, and everybody shared that computer back then.
And the familiar noise when it was...
Oh, yeah, when it was connecting, because it was all dial-up. So that would have been, his case. So his wife and his daughters would have been using the same computer that he was using.
Ballsy dude.
Yeah. And Montgomery kept a secret stash of love letters and photos from Jesse, which he hid from his wife, Cindy. These items, along with the packages sent to their shared address, made it increasingly difficult to conceal the affair. So in early 2006, likely January or February, Cindy Montgomery finally discovered her husband's online affair. And this discovery was triggered when she intercepted a package sent by Jesse to their home in Clarence. The intercepted package contained intimate items such as underwear, provocative photos, and love letters. The exact contents vary slightly across sources, but based on what she had already sent him, we can pretty well guess what was included. And this package, addressed to Thomas, was a tangible sign of his infidelity, prompting Cindy to investigate further. Upon finding that package, Cindy then discovered Montgomery's hidden stash of love letters, photos, and other correspondence from Jesse. These items revealed the depth of his online relationship, including explicit messages and declarations of love. These were all evidence of the affair's intensity, which shattered her perception of her husband as a faithful family man. And keep in mind what I said earlier, that the friction and the problems in their marriage really seemed like they were all in Nutbag's head. Mm-hmm. And so she wasn't at the same place that he was. She thought they had a happy marriage in this. And so when she discovered this, it had to have been like earth shattering, for her. So Cindy was obviously devastated and furious upon learning that Thomas, her husband of 17 years, was posing as an 18-year-old Marine to engage in a romantic and sexual relationship with a freaking 18-year-old girl. Right. Her shock was compounded by the fact that the affair involved the family home, because the gifts were sent to their address.
Right.
So determined to put an end to the affair and to protect her family, Cindy wrote a letter to Jesse's address in Oak Hill, West Virginia in early 2006. The letter was accompanied by a family photo showing dweeby little Thomas in his stupid little glasses, Cindy and their two daughters, providing undeniable proof that he was the dweeby little shit that he was.
Give the tiny gigglings, folks.
And so the letter, quoted by the Daily Mail and referenced across multiple sources, was direct and revealing. So it says, quote, "Let me introduce you to these people. The man in the center is Tom, my husband since 1989. He is 46 years old. Do not trust words on a computer. Let this go. You will only be hurt by a man who has mastered the art of manipulation and lies." End quote. So obviously that's just a portion of the letter. It was quite a bit longer, but the letter explicitly disclosed Thomas's true age of 46, his marital status, his role as a father, his dweeby little looks, his stupid little glasses, and it urged Jesse to end contact and warned her of his deceptive nature.
Which shows us that Cindy has some balls too.
She has balls, and she has a real motherly instinct to try to protect this 18-year-old from a 46-year-old predator. I'm sorry if I forgot, did we say how old his daughters were? Or were they around? We couldn't figure it out.
Okay.
They had been married for 17 years at this point, so my guess is they were probably in their earlier teens.
Definitely minors.
Definitely minors. Yeah.
So Cindy's protecting the image of her daughters, essentially.
Right. I mean, they were, I could put it this way, they were one hell of a lot closer to Jesse's age than Thomas was.
Exactly.
Because they were maybe 2 or 3 years younger than Jesse. I mean, even if they were 12 years old at the time, that's only 6 years younger than Jesse.
What I'm saying is Cindy's seeing Jesse as her daughters.
Right.
In this instance.
Yes. And the whole letter really does go on and say, you cannot trust people online. Be very careful. And so she really didn't attack Jesse at all in the letter. It was not at all an attack. It was definitely, you could tell she was pissed at her husband and wanted to protect this poor 18-year-old girl. That was really the tone of the letter.
Right.
So the letter aimed to shatter the illusion of Tommy, the 18-year-old Marine sniper, and like I said, to protect Jesse from further manipulation. The tone was firm but protective, reflecting Cindy's anger at Thomas and, like I said, a deep concern for the victim. Jesse was furious upon learning that Montgomery was nothing that he had claimed to be. She sent Montgomery a message expressing her outrage, stating, quote, "She hates me and you should be put in jail for this." And she ended the affair. But despite her initial fury, Jesse resumed contact with Montgomery soon after all of this, sending very mixed messages that alternated between anger, teasing, and flirtation. Messages like, quote, Tom, ... oh my G, indicates she continued to engage him, manipulating his emotions to keep him invested. This resumption was critical as it prolonged the toxic dynamic that would later involve Brian Barrett. The exposure humiliated Montgomery because he's already a dweeby little dude, and he cooked all of this crap up in his mind, and now it's all coming shattering down. I mean, he was to the point, I read some of that letter he wrote to himself. He was to the point where he was becoming this Tommy in his brain, and now
was shedding the Thomas skin.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, he said, "I will cease to Thomas 46 will cease to exist, and I will be Tommy 18 years old." Yeah. Like, he really believed it. He was out of his damn mind.
And I will be billionaire tomorrow.
Right.
So speak that into existence.
Exactly.
Right now.
Yes. He delusionally believed that he had hit the jackpot when Jesse continued messaging him, interpreting her actions as acceptance of his 46-year-old self. However, the revelation strained his marriage, obviously, and it intensified his obsession as he clung to this fantasy despite the truth being out. Cindy's letter indirectly set the stage for further escalation. Jesse, who is now aware of Montgomery's deception, began flirting with another man online.
Dun, dun.
And I don't say it like that to blame Cindy, because she did nothing wrong.
Right.
It's just what happened. So because of the revelation of Cindy's letter, Jesse found Brian Barrett through Montgomery's online contacts on Pogo.com. Barrett was part of the same Pogo chat room community, and he worked with Montgomery. So that makes him an ideal figure to provoke jealousy. Now, Brian used the screen name Beefcake, reflecting his athletic and youthful persona.
Come on, Brian. It's the only sad thing I will say about Brian is, come on.
But this also was in the early 2000s internet, so...
But still.
In mid 2006, likely that spring or early summer, Jesse initiated contact with Brian in the Pogo chat room, mirroring the same flirtatious approach that she had used with Montgomery. The sources do not provide the exact content of their first messages, but they describe her as reaching out with the same Talhotblond persona, presenting herself as Jessie, an 18-year-old high school senior from West Virginia who was vivacious, blonde, and athletic. She also sent provocative photos to draw Brian's interest, as she had done with Montgomery. So the relationship between Jesse and Brian developed rapidly in mid-2006, driven by Jesse's manipulative intent to provoke Thomas Montgomery and Brian's genuine interest in her. I mean, she was a super pretty girl. She was his age, or, they were right close to the same age group, So, for him to be pursuing her makes complete and total sense.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesse employed the same tactics that she had used with Montgomery, sending Brian romantic and provocative messages to build a connection. One message that she sent him reads, quote, "My sweet Brian, I love you." This indicates that she mirrored the affectionate tone used with Montgomery. These messages were designed to appeal to Brian's youth and sincerity, presenting Jesse as a potential romantic partner, like I said.
I almost believed you just then, too. Just so you...
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm working on my Oscar.
You read that well, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, under the screen name Beefcake, responded positively, engaging in flirtatious chats and expressing genuine interest in Jesse. Unlike Montgomery, Brian was honest about his identity, sharing his details and his life as a 22-year-old student and coach. His openness made him contrast to Montgomery's deception, which Jesse likely exploited to further manipulate the situation. Jesse deliberately publicized her connection with Brian in the Pogo chat rooms, where Montgomery was still active. It's described how she and Brian openly flirted, ensuring that Montgomery would see their interactions. This was a calculated move to provoke Montgomery, who was already humiliated by the exposure of his true identity. So Jesse and Brian went further, mocking Montgomery in the chat rooms by exposing his lies about being an 18-year-old Marine. They labeled him a liar and nearly a pedophile for posing as a teenager, which they're not too damn far off.
No.
And that just intensified his shame and jealousy. This public humiliation was a turning point as it fueled Montgomery's obsession and rage. Brian, unaware of the full stakes, began bragging about his online relationship with Jesse at Dynabrade Corporation, where he and Montgomery worked. It was later reported that Brian made crude comments, such as joking about popping her cherry or planning to meet Jesse in person. These remarks, likely intended as boastful banter among coworkers, were devastating to Montgomery, who overheard them and saw Brian as a romantic rival. Montgomery's jealousy was reaching a boiling point, as was evidenced by his threatening messages to Jesse, such as, quote, "Brian will pay in blood." Brian's openness about the relationship contrasted with Montgomery's secret shame, and this drove Montgomery to view Brian as a direct threat to his fantasy with Jesse. Montgomery was understandably confused, and any sane person would have blocked her and ran the other direction just as damn fast as they could go.
Exactly.
Thomas obviously was not that same person.
And neither was Tommy.
No. So Montgomery's messages to Jesse during this period reveal his emotional distress and desperation as she flaunted her connection with Brian. He said things to her such as, "Please, Jesse, stop with this Brian. You're killing me." And that's not a direct quote, but inferred from sources describing his desperate attempts to regain her affection. He was humiliated and hurt and was sending messages that begged her to return to her original connection. But he was like all over the freaking map too. Because he would be like, he would send her messages like foul messages, stuff that I won't even say, but you're a bitch and you're a blah, blah, blah. And then next time you'd be like, oh, please, I'm in love with you. And she was doing the same back and forth bipolar nonsense of hot one day, cold the next. I love you today, and I'm, flirting with Brian tomorrow. So it was just the perfect disaster with these two feeding off of each other. And as Jesse continued to engage Brian, Montgomery's messages took an even more violent turn, reflecting his jealousy and obsession. They included, like what I said before, that Brian was going to pay in blood and all kinds of other threats against Brian's life. And he hurled insults at Jesse, calling her names, expressing fury at her betrayal. Though exact quotes are not detailed beyond the tone of angry, unhinged messages, Social Catfish describes these as increasingly hostile. It's suggesting, like I said, it was a mix of pleading for her to come back one day, I want to kill you all, you're a whore the next day, and that's what it was. It was completely unhinged at this point. Brian expressed enthusiasm about meeting Jesse in person, and while at work at Dynabrade Corporation, he bragged about plans to drive to West Virginia to meet Jesse, indicating a concrete intention to take this relationship offline. The sources do not specify an exact date or timeline for this planned trip, but it was discussed in the months leading up to September of 2006, so it was likely that summer. And at least from Brian's perspective, it was most certainly going to occur in the immediate future. This wasn't a one day I'm going to get there type of comment or type of thought for him. It was very much I'm going to go to West Virginia and see her. I mean, it's not that long of a drive. It's not that far. And so it's, a 22-year-old who's working, has a car and stuff. It's well within, it's not like he has to get on a plane and fly around the world, Yeah. She's just a little bit south of him, so.
Tank of gas, some tunes.
Right.
Golden.
Yep. There was no specific itinerary that I could find provided in the sources. I don't think that they had ever set a certain date or anything, but from Brian, like I said, Brian's perspective, it was clear that this was going to happen. And his comments at work suggest that he was serious about the trip. This plan was encouraged by Jesse's flirtatious messages, such as, "My sweet Brian, I love you," which fueled his belief in a romantic future with her. I was limited in finding any direct quotes from Jesse and Montgomery's exchanges during this period, as much of the communication is just summarized like I have done. But some key messages explicitly quoted or closely paraphrased are as follows. And Angela, do you want to read those?
I don't know if I'll win an Oscar.
That's all right.
"She hates me. You should be put in jail for this," sent after Cindy's letter. This reflects Jesse's initial anger at Montgomery's deception, though she resumed contact soon after. The second one, "I know Tom, OMG." A teasing or manipulative message sent during their continued private chats, keeping Montgomery emotionally invested. And the final one, "I ache to be with Tommy." An earlier message, but reflective of the flirtatious tone Jesse maintained, string Montgomery along even as she pursued Brian.
And then from Montgomery to Jesse are quotes like, I've already quoted this one multiple times, but that is that Brian will pay in blood. And that is a direct threat sent in response to Jesse's relationship with Brian, highlighting Montgomery's violent jealousy. And then in the paraphrase, please, sources describe Montgomery begging Jesse to stop her relationship with Brian, with implied messages like, please, Jesse, stop this. You're hurting me. Not direct quotes, but inferred from his desperate tone. So as time went on, Montgomery's messages to Jesse, like I said, grew increasingly unhinged. During the period when Brian was planning his trip, Jesse intensified her public taunting of Montgomery in the Pogo chat rooms, flaunting her connection with Brian. She also continued to cultivate her relationship with Brian, sending romantic messages to encourage his affection and plans to meet him. So beyond the quoted, "My sweet Brian, I love you" message, she continued to send additional provocative photos, flirty chats, stuff that would maintain his interest. Investigators later recovered hundreds of pages of chat logs showing Montgomery's threats and pleas intensifying during this same period of time. And then throughout the summer of 2006, Brian continued discussing his intention to drive to West Virginia. His workplace comments and jokes were frequent enough to be noticed by coworkers and obviously by Montgomery. These remarks, combined with Jesse's encouragement, kept the idea of meeting alive, though no trip occurred. And I couldn't find any direct quotes of this, but I do know that she sent Brian stuff like, I'm really worried about you. I think he might hurt you, and that kind of stuff, along the same time frame as Montgomery was becoming completely unhinged. But Jesse...
Do you have any hinges left at this point?
I don't think he does at this point. And Jessie sustained her dual engagement, flirting with Brian to provoke Montgomery while taunting Montgomery in chat rooms. And then in private messages, she was flirting with Montgomery. And so he did make statements at this time, such as, I'm not a yo-yo, indicating that he was being treated in that way. Like I said, one day she loved him, the next day she hated him. And it was just driving him insane. He did the same.
They're both yo-yos.
And the part that blows my freaking mind is it's a damn chat room.
Mm-hmm.
And so first of all, you know this, but for our younger listeners, in order to get messages from a chat room, you had to be in the chat room.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to block anybody. You didn't have to do anything special.
You could go to side rooms, but
my point
they're having this in a public chat room.
My point is he could avoid this easily by just not going on the damn chat room anymore.
Glutton for punishment.
I mean, he's like begging, please stop, don't do it. But he's the one that's logging on and doing it. He's as guilty as she is.
Meanwhile, the rest of the people in the chat are sitting there with their popcorn.
Yeah. Can you believe these freaking psychos?
Yeah. They're in side chats. Like, what's happening?
Yeah. So she would attack and denigrate him and then reach out and flirt. The fact that he didn't just block her, like I said, or stop logging on shows how freaking delusional this dumb shit was. Because of his willingness to continue to participate in this nonsense, Jesse was able to keep him in a cycle of hope and then despair. So by August into early September 2006, the tension between Montgomery and Brian at Dynabraid became palpable. As noted by coworkers, Brian's open discussion of his plans to meet Jesse contracted with Montgomery's secretive obsession, creating a volatile environment. Montgomery's jealousy was fueled by both the online taunts and Brian's real-world boasting.
This would be right about the time that I wouldn't be near either of them at work because something was about to boil over.
But can you imagine his coworkers, which I didn't see any interviews with them, but they had to have been thinking like, what is wrong with this freaking loser?
Both of them, kind of.
Well, not really Jesse. Not really Brian. I don't really see where he was doing anything wrong.
But people might be like, why is he still interacting while she's still interacting with Tommy?
Yeah, maybe. But my mind goes more to, I've got kids older than Brian was at this time.
So do I.
And if I had a coworker that was my age that was pitching a fit because a girl my son's age was talking to another boy my son's age, I would be like, what in the hell's wrong with you? Of course she's talking to somebody her own age. Of course she doesn't want a 46-year-old dweeb like you. So I don't know what his coworkers were thinking, but I know what I would have been thinking. I'd been thinking like, what in the hell is wrong with you? You're married, you have 2 kids, and you're getting jealous because an 18-year-old likes a 22-year-old?
I am imploring now any of his coworkers out there that may happen to hear this, please comment and tell us what you were thinking and if John was right.
Absolutely.
Because I think John's right.
I bet anything because, the vast majority of these guys are probably 40, 50-year-old men. They probably have kids Jesse's age.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm sure they were thinking like, this guy is a freaking loser, man.
Keep him from...
Yeah, they had to have been. So while not explicitly detailed in any of the sources, Montgomery said to Jesse something along the lines of, "I'm going to shoot him like a sniper." And he referenced that he had a .30 caliber rifle and camouflage gear, which suggests that he began planning violence in response to this ongoing humiliation and, more importantly, Brian's trip plans. That really was a major trigger to dweeby little psycho. Is he at all costs, he wanted to stop Brian from going.
Don't take drinks while John's describing dweeby little psychos.
I think he really wanted to stop Brian from going and seeing Jesse, because in his twisted, psychotic little mind, he was going to go down there, they were going to have sex, they were going to fall in love, and then he would never have a chance.
Forever.
Yeah. And keep in mind, like I said, Jesse was a beautiful 18-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. The idea that this dweeby little 46-year-old putz thought that he really had an honest chance with this girl, it's just insane. But I digress. So in the days before September 15th, Jessie continued her manipulative communication with both men. She sent Brian romantic messages to sustain his interest, while taunting Montgomery with public posts and private messages that kept him emotionally entangled. Montgomery's messages likely included further pleas and threats, though no new specific quotes are provided beyond those that I've already cited. Brian remained unaware of the full danger, believing his relationship with Jesse was genuine and continuing to discuss the potential trip at work. The Buffalo News emphasized his kind-hearted nature, suggesting that he did not fully grasp the threat posed by Montgomery. And I will also say he was 22. And until you've encountered a few psychos, you don't really recognize them. Yeah. You know, and as a 22-year-old kid, I mean, he probably just didn't recognize the danger signs because he'd never been exposed to that kind of psychosis before, you know? So
he's not unhinged, so he doesn't think this guy will actually do anything. They're invincible. They think they're invincible.
They think they're invincible. I mean, this guy is married. He has kids.
Yeah.
The idea that, you know, he's serious, it really doesn't click to a sane person, because no sane person really believes, no sane 46-year-old man truly believes that he can have a relationship with an 18-year-old girl. I mean, be real. And so Brian had to be kind of that mindset, kind of like, I don't know what this dude's like freaking out about or whatever, but you know, anyway, the combination of Brian's ongoing plans to meet Jesse and Jesse's taunting and the public humiliation in the chat rooms pushed Montgomery to finally act. His messages and threatening tone during this time reflect a culmination of his rage and his obsession. So on September 15th, 2006, Brian Barrett was working his shift at Dynabrake Corporation, which would end at 10 p.m. Brian was working a standard shift, likely in the factory's production area, consistent with his role alongside Thomas Montgomery. No sources specified the exact start time of his shift, but it was likely an evening or a second shift, common for part-time workers, especially in that area and in factories and stuff like that. And it was set to end
swing shift.
And it was set to end around 10 p.m. So on that same night, Thomas Montgomery meticulously prepared to carry out a murder, grabbed his, quote, sniper rifle, which I couldn't confirm, but I'm almost 100% positive that it was an M1 Garand. And the M1 is a .30-06 caliber semi-automatic rifle, which was adopted by the U.S. military in 1936. And it was its standard issue service rifle back then. So it served prominently through World War II and the Korean War. So, you know, when you think of soldiers out there now carrying an M16, back then, all of them were carrying an M1. It was just the standard issue rifle that all of them got. So it was designed by John Garand, and it featured an 8-round clip, a gas-operated action, and a distinctive ping when the clip ejected after firing. So once you've spent your clip, you get that ping, because a lot of people refer to magazines as clips. They're not. They're magazines. This was actually what's known as a stripper clip, which is just a little metal strip that holds a line of bullets so they can just quickly be pushed down into the top of the rifle.
It's not encased.
Right, yes. And so the M1 was renowned for its reliability, accuracy, and rapid fire compared to bolt-action rifles. And it was a game changer in combat, earning praise as, quote, the greatest battle implement ever devised. And George S. Patton is the one that made that quote. It weighed in at 9.5 pounds with a 24-inch barrel, and it remains iconic among firearms enthusiasts and collectors. I freaking love them. They're awesome guns.
Probably see 1,000 of them down at the museum.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's several of them down there. They still are producing them, you know, they still make, but obviously they're, you know, a different, they've differed over the years. Oh, yeah, you're not getting the actual military issue ones, but they're a great gun. And so for those that aren't gun people, first of all, I'm probably boring the hell out of you, so sorry. But the 30-aught.
That's why I throw things in just now.
Exactly. Yep. But for those people that don't know, the 30-06 round is no joke. I mean, it is a serious round. So, you know, for all the publicity that the AR gets, that's a teeny tiny little round in comparison to the .6. It's not even in the same class. So the .6 is a gun that you could take any large game that's going to be found in North America, you could take with a 30-06 rifle. So that's moose, that's elk, that's pretty much everything that you would find. If you're not going to go hunt in Africa and take down elephants and stuff, the .6 is sufficient. So that's just to give you an idea that it is a very serious round. Yes. Yeah. So Thomas got his gun from his gun cabinet. He dressed in camouflage clothing and a ski mask to conceal his identity, and likely to play into his whole fantasy of being a sniper. And he headed for Dynabrade. Family photo later used as evidence showed Montgomery posing with this rifle, affirming his access to it. Now, that's what I was able to find in the sources and everything. When I watched the documentary, I think that the documentary is probably the accurate source. It said, it showed actually, I think it showed the original picture that was used as evidence, and it was actually a picture of his gun cabinet with that gun in it. But one way or the other, the cops had a picture of him with that M1, and so they could tie it back to him later. Okay. So the sources do not specify when or how he obtained the rifle or the gear, but his actions suggest premeditation. And he'd likely
because that's not his uniform, I'm sure.
No. And he'd likely planned it in the days and weeks prior, driven by his Brian will pay in blood threat. And I honestly think that he had owned that M1 for years, for a long time. I don't think he went out and bought the gun specifically for this. He had it. That's why it was in a family picture.
Right.
And, you know, he did have a gun cabinet. It was plumb full of guns. Nothing was said about like if he was a hunter or anything, but, you know, he had these delusions of grandeur that he was a Marine Corps sniper.
Yeah.
So it's not at all surprising to me that he had guns as well. Not that people with guns have delusions of grandeur.
Right.
But this kind of nutbag, that's why he would have bought the guns.
Yeah, with his fake memories of sniper life. #sniper life.
Exactly. So Montgomery positioned himself in the Dynabrade parking lot, arriving before Brian's shift ended at 10 p.m., and the lot was isolated, providing cover for Montgomery to wait undetected. He knew Brian's shift schedule from their shared workplace, allowing him to time his ambush precisely. No sources detail his exact movements earlier that day, like Whether he worked his own shift or whether he was home, we don't know, but his presence in the lot indicate that he planned to target Brian as he left work. So after finishing his shift, Brian walked to his pickup truck in the Dynabrade parking lot located in the industrial area of Clarence. There are no reports of him engaging in any unusual activities such as stopping to talk with coworkers or make other plans, indicating that he intended to drive home to Lockport, which was about 20 miles away. The sources do not detail Brian's activities earlier on September 15, 2006, such as whether he had attended classes at Buffalo State College or coached a little league or used soccer or anything like that.
Any of his normals.
Yeah. Given it was a Friday, he likely balanced work with his studies and community activities and probably time with friends. You know, it's a Friday night. Maybe he was going to go out with his buddies. Who knows? He's a 22-year-old kid. So, you know, the world's an oyster at that point. He could do anything he wanted to do, but there's no specific accounts that confirm his schedule either before or after his shift. So around 10 p.m., Brian finished his shift and walked to his pickup truck in the Dynabrade parking lot. He was alone, intending to drive home, like I said, to Lockport. Thomas emerged from a hiding spot in the parking lot, approached Brian's truck, and fired 3 shots with the .30 caliber rifle, which I'm pretty sure was an M1, striking Brian in the neck and the left arm, killing him instantly. Then Thomas fled the scene immediately after. So Jesse, there's no documented interaction with Brian or with Thomas during this time, so she was likely unaware that the murder had occurred. And then Brian, after 10 p.m., Brian remained in his truck where he would stay undiscovered, with his body not being found until September 17th.
Okay.
Yeah. So Thomas, after the shooting, he returned to an unspecified location, but he likely went home and avoided any immediate detection. No sources detail his actions post-murder, but he did not confess. You know, it's not like he went to the police station to confess, and he didn't flee Clarence area. He fled the parking lot and went home, I'm sure.
Right.
But he didn't like take off for Canada or Mexico or anything like that. Right. And again, there's no evidence that Jesse communicated with either of them after 10 o'clock either. So Brian Barrett's body tragically wasn't discovered for 2 days. On September 17th, his body was discovered in his truck in the parking lot of Dynabrade Corporation. A coworker noticed Brian's pickup in an isolated part of the company parking lot and went to inspect it closer. He discovered the body of Brian laying inside, and that he had been shot 3 times at close range in the neck and in the left arm. So sources described the murder as a sniper shooting, with Erie County Sheriff's Lieutenant Ron Kenyon noting its precision. Brian was found inside his truck, slumped over, with evidence of the gunshot wounds indicating a targeted attack. The isolated nature of the lot meant the body went unnoticed for 2 days. As the factory was in an industrial area, like we said, there's minimal activity in that area, probably especially on weekends.
I was about to ask.
Yeah, and no sources mention specific forensic details like blood splatter or exact positioning, but the close-range shots suggest Montgomery was near Brian when firing. I mean, he didn't take the quintessential sniper shot from 1,500 yards away.
But them calling it that probably
made him feel great for a little bit.
Yeah.
So upon discovery, coworker alerted authorities, and the Erie County Sheriff's Department responded to the scene. The New York Times notes that the killing stumped investigators initially due to Brian's reputation as a quiet, well-liked individual with no apparent enemies. And I gotta say, this kid just seems like he was one cool dude. He really does. Just a good kid.
Why are all the cool ones stolen?
I know it. Yeah, because this is the kind of kid that, you know, if he was your son, you would be just proud as could be of him, you know, like I am of my kids, you know.
Same.
Just beaming with pride because they're such good kids. And that's Brian. He's just obviously a super cool kid. And Brian's truck, left undisturbed, provided a contained crime scene, and investigators began collecting physical evidence, including bullet casings, and later identified DNA that was linked to Thomas Montgomery. So investigators confirmed Brian had been shot with a .30 caliber gun. The precision of the shots and the use of camouflage and a ski mask suggested premeditation and a perpetrator with some firearms knowledge. Witnesses reported hearing gunshots around 10 p.m. on September 15th, and others saw someone in the area helping establish the time of death.
Sorry, witnesses reported hearing gunshots, but he wasn't found for 2 days.
Yeah, but I gotta say, I lived in Ohio, not very far from this. My daughter was born in West Virginia, and hearing gunshots,
regular thing.
It's pretty common out there. Yeah, I mean, this wouldn't have been during like deer season, but man, West Virginia, them people out there, they hunt all the damn time, and you hear a lot of gunshots out there. So I realize this is in New York, but still that area, that northeastern area of the United States, I don't know about like Buffalo, that area. I've been through there, but I've never lived there. So I don't know if it would be the same, but a lot of those rural areas out east, and it sounds like Clarence was a little bit more rural.
Yeah.
Gunshots wouldn't be unusual. Then in the city, like Buffalo, with gang members and stuff. I don't imagine that gunshots are that unusual either. So I don't know.
I live on private property in rural Wyoming, and we play a game quite regularly called "Is That Gunshots or Fireworks?"
Yeah.
And we still chat, and that's where the freaking internet comes in. You get on internet and like look up, is anybody else talking about gunshots? I'm struggling with the fact that it took 2 days, but you explain.
Well, and then the other thing too is I don't know anything about this. I just know that witnesses did report hearing gunshots. I don't know if they called the cops, which they very well might have. We're talking about I didn't look it up on like Google Earth or anything, but in my mind, sources did say it was a heavily industrial area. So cop could have easily driven through the area to see if anything was going on, and seeing a truck parked in a parking lot of a corporation, he's not going to drive over there and check it out likely. So,
and I guess sometimes this fire too. So.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't know when they reported it. So it could have been after they learned that it was a murder. And then to your point, they could have been like, oh, those sounds, I bet those were the gunshots.
Okay.
You know?
Light bulb. All right.
So
I take it back.
The Dynabrig co-workers quickly pointed investigators toward the psycho little dweeby bastard, Thomas Montgomery, due to his known rivalry over this online relationship with a woman known as Jessie, or Talhotblond. And employees reported that Brian had bragged about his budding romance with Jessie, including his plans to drive to West Virginia, while Montgomery, age 47 by this point, had also boasted about his relationship with her since May of 2005. And this rivalry, documented by ABC News, was marked by public taunts, like we said, on Pogo.com chat rooms, where Brian and Jessie exposed Montgomery's lies about being an 18-year-old Marine. So by September 18th, 2006, Montgomery became obviously the primary suspect, as coworkers' accounts of the love triangle provided a very clear motive. And the Daily Mail states that, quote, everyone knew that Thomas had done it, end quote. Yeah. So at the factory, everybody's like, it's that crazy bastard. That's that psycho, that dweeby little bastard.
Yeah.
It's him. And so investigators learned Montgomery had fled the scene after the murder, raising concerns that he might target Jessie next.
Did he go back to work? No. Okay. So
he didn't. Well, no, he didn't. I think he was off for the weekend. Okay. So I don't know all of the specifics, but once they figured out that this psychopath was fixated on this 18-year-old girl in West Virginia and had just killed this guy,
Time to go to West Virginia.
Yeah, they were like, okay, we've got to get to this girl before Psycho Dweeb does. So
Go Dweeb.
the Erie County Sheriff's Department, in coordination with local West Virginia authorities, visited the Schuyler residence in Oak Hill, West Virginia, 1 or 2 days after Brian's body was discovered. Captain Ron Kenyon sent officers to ensure Jesse's safety, driven by, like I said, the concerns that Montgomery might go there and kill her. The exact date is not pinpointed, but the urgency of the situation suggests the visit occurred by September 19th at the latest, and probably it was like as soon as they found out.
Yeah.
You know?
Seems like they're faster than some.
Yeah, they really responded quickly.
Yeah.
So when officers arrived at the Schuyler home, Mary, age 45, answered the door. The Block Island Times and the Daily Beast describe her as initially evasive when asked about Jesse or Talhotblond. Police expected to meet a young, pretty teenage girl, making Mary's appearance as a middle-aged fat toad a surprising twist. So, officers questioned Mary about her connection to the online persona Talhotblond, referencing the chat logs, the photos, the packages sent to Montgomery and Clarence, New York. And they presented evidence of her communication with Montgomery and with Brian, including romantic messages and provocative images, which were chased to that address. The presence of Jesse, who matched the photos sent as Talhotblond, likely prompted some direct questions. Now, some sources say that Jesse was there. She wasn't. Jesse was not there when the cops showed up. It was just Mary, but there was pictures of Jesse obviously around the house. It was her house. And so the cops were like, it's the girl in this picture, you know?
She lives here.
And so police had concrete evidence linking the Schuyler address to the Talhotblond persona, including the physical packages with underwear and photos and letters that were sent to Montgomery, and they had the chat logs from Pogo.com. The New York Times notes that investigators had already begun searching computers, making it clear that Mary's online activities were very traceable. And this evidence left her little room to deny her involvement. So the pictures of Jesse during the visit was a critical factor, as officers could see that the real pictures of a real person were used, contradicting the online persona. So Mary couldn't sustain the lie when faced with questions about her daughter's supposed communications. She was hemming and hawing before she finally broke down. The realization that her actions had contributed to a murder, combined with police's direct questioning, likely overwhelmed her, and it was noted that she wailed as she confessed, suggesting maybe a mix of guilt, but I think probably it was more fear and, I don't know, maybe some relief that she had been caught. But this, as you'll see, this is her personality. This is what she does. So the police focus on ensuring Jesse's safety, and their suspicion that Montgomery might target her added urgency to the interview, which also pressured Mary to clarify the situation more quickly than she may have otherwise. So Captain Kenyon's directive to find Jesse alive, as was reported at ABC News, underscores the high stakes. So Mary, like I said, broke down in tears, and she confessed that she, the fat, short little toad woman, was Talhotblond, and it was not her 18-year-old daughter. So this sick and twisted bitch admitted to posing as an 18-year-old high school senior since the spring of 2005, using her own daughter's photos, videos, and personal belongings and details to engage in romantic and explicit online relationships with Montgomery, later Brian, and who the hell knows who else.
Right. I was just thinking maybe other people.
Most likely other people.
Sick.
So, and she confirmed sending the provocative images. She confirmed that she sent the underwear and messages like, I love you always and forever, Tommy, and my sweet Brian, I love you. And she did all of this, obviously, without her daughter's knowledge, without the real Jesse's knowledge. So,
I'm floored.
yeah. So Mary explained that she began the deception out of boredom, as she being tragically bored. She's a tragically bored housewife who was seeking attention, and she used a webcam to capture images of Jesse in the car or at the swimming pool in her bathing suit. And she sent Jesse's actual underwear to Montgomery. Actions that were described as almost predatory. I say they're not almost predatory. They're freaking predatory.
But it also begs the question, how did Jesse not realize that all of these articles of clothing were just missing?
I don't know, but
how many pairs of underwear do you have to own
and I don't
not notice that they're disappearing?
I don't know like how many she had, but I do know, yeah, I mean, you know, Mary, from all accounts, was a housewife, although honestly, I think she sat on her fat ass almost all the time.
Right.
But she likely was the one that was doing the laundry and stuff. And so it's probably easily explainable that, you know, hey, Mom, I'm missing underwear. And she was probably like, oh,
laundry.
Oh, it's in the laundry. Or she could have easily said, oh, yeah, well, when I washed it, I saw they had a hole in them. So I tossed them. And here, I bought you a new package of underwear or whatever, you know. So it probably was very explainable as the mother, just to be like, you know, I just thought you needed some new ones or, you know, whatever.
Right. I get it now.
So, but I would say that her actions were most definitely predatory. They're absolutely disgusting. I mean, I can't imagine a parent doing this. To me, this is right up there with like pedophiles.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and those pictures are online forever.
Forever. And
like quoting The Sandlot, forever.
Right. And unfortunately, and I say that, you know, kind of unfortunately, it's kind of a blessing and a curse that, first of all, Jessie was 18, so she was probably at a better emotional place to deal with this than she would have been if she was younger.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, she was 18, which made her an adult. And so they couldn't get this sick bitch on like child pornography or something like that.
But what about slander and libel?
They tried everything.
Are we getting to that?
We're getting to it, yes.
I knew I would at least once.
So her poor daughter, the real Jessie, had absolutely no clue that this was going on. And Mary's confession clarified that her daughter was an unwitting victim. Mary's confession was tearful and dramatic, with her, quote, breaking down as she revealed the truth. But in that show, I told you, they interviewed her husband. Like I said, he seemed like a really cool guy. And he said, this is her MO. This is what she did, to the point that there was a running joke in her family, because this is just what she did. She would play the victim, cry, and put on a big show.
How is he still with her? How did he not just bail? Like,
you know, I don't know for sure, but it's probably he didn't say this, but you know, it was probably his daughter was, you know, get her graduated and stuff like that. And I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of reasons that go into that, you know, and maybe because he had dealt with that his whole marriage, obviously, because she did that at home. So he probably just ignored her.
It probably kept her out of his hair.
Yeah. You know, he probably just didn't pay attention to it. He probably just learned to deal with it over the years. Yeah. But Jessie was obviously devastated when she learned about this. I can't even imagine what this poor girl went through. She was traumatized, and she later cut off all contact with Mary and moved to Virginia to live with relatives while attending college. And I will say that she went to her dad and was like, did you know? And he was like, I didn't know. And, you know, she was initially really angry with him too, which, that's
Oh,
perfectly...
you see various shades of red when you find this out.
That's very understandable. But I mean, he dropped Mary like immediately. It was, I mean, as soon as he found this out, he was like, bitch, you're done. And so him and Jesse were able to repair their relationship. And like I said, he seemed like a really cool guy. He seemed like a really great dad. So, at least she has him.
Yeah. And family in Virginia.
Right. But I cannot imagine how traumatic and difficult this had to have been on this poor girl. She never really discovered the full extent of the deception until the later trial and like reading about it online and in papers and stuff. Because the fat little toad, her mom, she was like, she just tried to minimize it by saying like, oh, I was talking to this guy on the internet and I guess he killed somebody else. And so both the husband yeah, like she really didn't have any part in it. Like it wasn't until the trial that everything came out that, oh no, this was like an ongoing affair. No, she didn't just send like pictures of Jesse. She sent her underwear. Like she didn't tell her family this. They found out about it through third-party sources, which makes it even all the worse.
That is the shittiest way to find out.
Absolutely. So this confession shifted the investigation, confirming that, quote, Talhotblond was a catfish persona created by Fat Mary, not by Jesse. And officers likely collected additional evidence such as access to Mary's computer and further statements to corroborate the chat logs. The revelation that everyone was misleading each other except for Barrett reframed the case's narrative. So this poor kid was in this love triangle mess, and he was being completely open and honest about who he was.
The most innocent.
Yeah. The other two idiots were all fake and phony bastards, and this poor kid is stuck in the middle, and he's the one that ends up getting killed,
literally paying.
The story wouldn't be near as tragic if Mary or Thomas would have been on the receiving end because they kind of asked for it.
Yeah.
This poor kid did not. So Thomas Montgomery was arrested on November 27, 2006 for the murder of Brian Barrett. This is confirmed by multiple sources, including the New York Times and CBS News, which report that he was charged with second-degree murder following his arrest on that date. The investigation uncovered damning evidence. Investigators found Montgomery's DNA on a peach pit that was left at the crime scene because,
good job, Tommy.
The Marine Corps teaches its snipers to be sure to take your peaches and spit your peach pits out where somebody can find them.
Leave all evidence where you're hiding.
Right. Yes. And then, like I said, the photo that showed he was in possession of the murder weapon, there was a leather cartridge case with dog hairs that linked to his pet, and hundreds of pages of Pogo.com chat logs, including his threat that Brian will pay in blood and all the other threats that he had sent to Jesse. And then there was the coworker testimony about the rivalry over Jesse that solidified the motive. So by January 20th, 2007, prosecutors led by Assistant District Attorney Frank Sedita offered Montgomery a plea deal to reduce the charge from second-degree murder to first-degree manslaughter, which would carry a 20-year minimum sentence. Montgomery initially rejected this offer, possibly hoping for a trial where he could argue that he had diminished mental capacity due to his online obsession, because that was suggested by his attorney, who was John J. Malloy. But on August 20th, 2007, just as jury selection was set to begin, Montgomery accepted the plea deal and pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter, admitting that he intentionally shot Brian 3 times through his pickup truck window. The Lockport Journal quotes Montgomery's monotone admission to Justice Wolfgang, where he confirmed that he shot Barrett, quote, through the window of the pickup, causing his death, end quote. But when initially asked if he intended to kill Barrett, Montgomery said no. But his lawyer, elbowed him in the ribs or whatever, and so he quickly corrected himself because that was part of the plea deal. You got to admit it.
And slightly the most honorable thing he's ever done in his whole freaking life.
I don't think so.
No?
Taking a plea deal?
No. Finally admitting something.
Oh, but only because he had to.
But
he didn't do it because he actually gave a shit.
Slightly.
Sorry, as you couldn't tell, I hate this guy. So
with slightly, see, I gotta calm you down.
You're just way nicer than me. Is what it boils down to.
Let's get a few episodes in, and I'll probably change.
But the plea agreement,
watch the evolution of Angela. As
there you go. The plea agreement, which was discussed with Barrett's family, ensured a minimum 20-year sentence, potentially up to 25 years. With sentencing scheduled for October 29th, 2007. So they didn't agree on exactly what the sentence would be. That would be up to the judge. Right. It would be between 20 and 25 years is what the deal was. So that October 29th sentencing was later postponed to November 27th. And Erie County District Attorney Frank J. Clark stated, quote, "The 20-year definitive sentence is right in the middle of that range. So I think that it satisfied everyone's needs, reflecting the balance between justice and avoiding a trial's uncertainty." So
sad to be satisfied.
I'm not satisfied.
I know.
In this case,
satisfied everyone's needs instead of fulfilled.
Yeah, I am definitely not satisfied. I think this psycho should have died in prison. That's what I think. So before sentencing, Montgomery attempted to withdraw his guilty plea. His attorney, John J. Nuccinero, argued that Montgomery suffered from untreated depression and did not fully comprehend the plea deal due to his mental state.
No. That was just him playing back and forth.
Yeah.
Like he did the first time.
Yeah.
It's just another game.
His lawyer also claimed that he was placed in the Erie County Holding Center's Special Observation Ward post-plea, and also suggested a trial could have been the nation's first to argue diminished capacity caused by internet obsession, stating, quote, "Had the case gone to trial, it would have been the nation's first defense involving claims of diminished mental capacity caused by the internet where fantasy and reality are blurred," end quote.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so basically this lawyer wanted to make a name for himself.
Yes, he did.
Is what that comes down to. So Frank Sedita countered that Montgomery's attempt was motivated by a wrongful death lawsuit filed by the Barrett family against Montgomery, Mary Schuyler, and Dinah Braid. Sedita argued that Montgomery's plea statements could be used against him in a civil suit, and he believed that Mary Schuyler, a key witness, might be reluctant to testify after being sued, making a trial more favorable for Montgomery. Sedita stated, "It's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to get her to come from West Virginia, and the defendant knows that." So Nuccinero denied Montgomery knew of the lawsuit before seeking to withdraw the plea. The discovery of the peach pit with Montgomery's DNA at the crime scene obtained covertly from a Mountain Dew can. So not the peach pit, obviously, he left that there, but they got his DNA from a Mountain Dew can that he drank during questioning. And that was a pivotal factor in Montgomery's decision to plead guilty because they had him. Yeah. It was over. Because that strengthened the prosecution's case so much. They had DNA evidence showing it was him.
Right.
And Clark noted that, quote, "In all likelihood, the climax of the case would have been that peach pit." Like, that was it. That sealed the deal. There was no question it was him. So on October 7, 2007, Justice Wolfgang rejected Montgomery's bid to withdraw his plea, emphasizing that his August 20th admission was clear and deliberate. She stressed that Montgomery admitted his guilt in September 15, 2006, in the in the September 15th, 2006 killing that resulted from an online love triangle between three people who did not even know each other. And the judge makes a really important point there, because none of them had met. And had they, both of the guys would have been like, you're a fat little toad, we're not interested. So on November 27, 2007, in state Supreme Court, Justice Penny, and this I did find interesting, but in New York, the Supreme Court acts as a trial court as well. And so they actually hear murder cases, because I was thinking, like, my research, I was like looking at all these articles and I was like, something's wrong here. Why is the Supreme Court hearing a murder case without an appeal? But in New York, they act as a trial court. So it's very weird, but it's not a mistake. It was the Supreme Court. So,
all right then.
In the state Supreme Court, Justice Penny M. Wolfgang sentenced Montgomery, then 48, to 20 years in prison with 5 years of post-release supervision for first-degree manslaughter. The sentencing followed a protracted hearing where both sides presented arguments. Montgomery, described as a divorced father of 2 teenage daughters, chose not to speak at the hearing because Cindy left his sorry ass too.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud of both of the spouses in this, because both of them were like, oh, I'm out. They were done with these psychos right after it happened.
Like a line for sanity.
Exactly. Frank Sedita pushed for the maximum 25-year sentence, describing Montgomery's almost predatory pursuit of Jesse. Again, I don't think it was almost, but that's me.
Right.
And his obsessive desire to make Brian suffer, stating that, quote, the chats reveal an obsessive desire to make Brian Barrett suffer, end quote. Sedita highlighted Montgomery's jealousy after Jessie, or Mary Schuyler, fooled her advances toward him and began flirting with Barrett instead, citing messages like, quote, Brian will pay in blood. Brian's poor father, Daniel Barrett, read a letter to the court describing Brian as a student leader at Niagara County Community College and urging for the maximum sentence. He said, quote, I don't wish that evil should ever walk the streets again, end quote. Amen. Hallelujah. I am right there with Daniel 100%. This bastard should never have seen the light of day. Daniel also expressed the family's trauma, adding, quote, my wife and I don't understand how this could happen, how such evil could walk the earth. To gun down a boy over simple jealousy does not make sense to us, end quote. Agree again. There is no logic in this. Post-sentencing, Daniel Barrett noted that justice was done, but nothing's going to bring my son back. Nuccinero portrayed Montgomery as a family man, a former Marine who'd been law-abiding until his online obsession, stating, until September 26th, this was a man who held his head high. By September 2006, call it obsession, call it addiction, call it what you want. He was suffering from a diminished capacity of some sort, end quote, which I gotta say, that's the case with everybody.
Right.
You haven't committed a crime until you commit your first crime.
Yeah.
So to me, I don't give a shit. When you stalk a 22-year-old kid and shoot him, I don't give a shit if you've done it 20 times or once. It don't matter.
Yeah.
They need to lock you away.
Yeah.
He highlighted Montgomery's involvement in his church as president of his daughter's swim club, as well as his suicide attempt in jail post-arrest, indicating mental distress. Indicating he didn't want to go to prison is what that indicates.
Right.
Justice Wolfgang called the killing totally senseless, stating, this young man has been cut off in the prime of his life. All of this for absolutely no reason. Agree. She imposed the 20-year sentence, aligning with the plea agreement which Barrett's parents consented to after assurances that Montgomery would serve longer than a potential second-degree murder conviction might allow. Nuccinero announced plans to appeal the sentence within a week, arguing Montgomery's mental state and the plea's validity. Montgomery stated that he was appealing, claiming his plea was coerced, but no further outcomes of the appeal are detailed in any sources. I don't think it happened. I don't think he ever appealed. I don't know what happened, but I know he wasn't granted any sort of appeal. Montgomery, now approximately 66 as of May 2025, was sent to Attica prison. And I dug into this very deep when I found out that he was later released from Wyoming. But rest easy, Angela. This refers to Wyoming Correctional Facility in Attica, New York.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And he was released on January 11th, 2024. I couldn't find any details of his post-release status.
Pretty sure we have plenty of douchebag wannabe snipers in Wyoming. We don't need it.
We don't need any more. So
thank you for finding that. And
well, when you so I looked him up on the New York inmate locator, and it said released from Wyoming, and I was like,
excuse me?
No. But then I got to digging, and then there. I was like, really? Why? What? But no. So they have a correctional facility in Attica that is called Wyoming Correctional Facility.
That's interesting.
So, and I couldn't find anything about his life post-release, but he's still on the 5 years. He has to do 5 years of basically parole. He's, being watched and everything. So he's still on that, at least. Mm-hmm. But the sorry son of a bitch should be locked away.
Definitely.
After Mary Schuyler's confession...
Not in Wyoming.
Not in Wyoming. After Mary Schuyler's confession on September 18th or 19th, 2006, that she was Talhotblond, prosecutors in Erie County, New York, led by District Attorney Frank J. Clark and Assistant District Attorney Frank Sedida, extensively reviewed her actions to determine if she could be held criminally liable. Mary's catfishing, posing as her daughter Jessie, sending provocative photos and videos, and manipulating both Montgomery and Brian was a central factor in this love triangle that led to the murder. Her messages of, I know Tom, oh my OMG, and public taunts exposing Montgomery's lives were seen as provocative. Prosecutors searched for applicable laws in New York and in West Virginia that they could maybe charge Mary with, focusing on her role in escalating the conflict. They examined potential charges like incitement, conspiracy, or computer fraud. Given her deceptive online persona and the use of Jessie's identity without her consent.
Yeah, wouldn't Jessie have a lawsuit here?
You would think so.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
That's okay. A related case of Dory Drew, convicted of misdemeanor computer fraud in 2008, proposing as a teenager, was later overturned, suggesting prosecutors considered similar angles, but they found no direct precedent for it. And a lot of this comes from the fact that this was early on in the days of the internet.
Yeah.
So because of this case and other cases like it, we now have a bunch of laws on the books that deal with this, but at that time there was none.
Yeah.
Mary's actions, while morally reprehensible, did not meet the threshold for criminal liability under the 2006 New York law. Former Assistant District Attorney Ken Case, who initially handled the case, explained, quote, her actions are not criminal, at least not in New York State, end quote. He noted that Mary's manipulation, including flaunting her relationship with Brian to provoke Montgomery, was not explicitly illegal. So prosecutors determined that Mary did not intend for Montgomery to commit murder, as is required for a charge like incitement or aiding and abetting. And that is the reason that I framed when I did the whole murder, what was happening. That's why I included Jessie. Did not communicate with any of them at this time. Jessie did not communicate with them at this time because had she had knowledge, had she encouraged it, had she done anything, they could have got her ass.
Yeah.
But because she didn't know, and it seems very likely that she really didn't know,
right,
that then there was nothing that they could charge her with. It's insane. It sucks, but there wasn't a law against it. And before the internet, who could have foreseen a need for a law like this? I couldn't have. So the New York Times quotes Chief Christopher Rankin, says, quote, "She was doing absolutely nothing wrong. She obviously didn't realize what was going to happen or that there would be a love triangle," end quote. To that, I've got to say,
oh, come on now. That ain't even bullshit. That's horse shit.
Yep.
What she was doing was 100% wrong. I think is what he was saying is she did nothing legally.
Yeah.
Illegal. I mean, I hope that's what he was saying, because what she did was wrong on so many levels. Just simply what she did to her poor daughter was so wrong. The fact that it led to murder is even worse, but everything about what she did was wrong. It just wasn't illegal. So reflects an earlier view that Mary was not criminally culpable, though later contradicted by prosecutors' frustration. They really wanted to charge her.
So do we.
They tried everything, but they just couldn't. And to make it even more difficult, Mary's actions occurred in West Virginia, which complicated New York's ability to charge her. Zaida's comment about the difficulty of getting Mary to testify, just to get her up to testify from West Virginia, suggests that there was some serious logistical challenges in pursuing charges across state lines.
I struggle with that. Doesn't a subpoena work?
To get her up to testify?
Yeah.
Yeah, they could subpoena her, and then they would have to go through the whole process of it, getting an arrest warrant issued for denial of the subpoena, having her arrested in West Virginia, having her extricated.
Okay.
Well, I just mean if she denied the subpoena.
Right.
As far as charging her criminally in this case, it would have been extremely hard, because even if she had broken New York law, she did it in West Virginia.
Yeah.
So if it's not against the law in West Virginia, I don't even think New York could have charged her, because she wasn't in New York. She wasn't in their jurisdiction when she broke that law. The law didn't exist, so it's a moot point. But if there would have been a law, it still would have been difficult, because she committed the crime in another state.
But if there would have been a law, would that not be when we would insert the FBI, because they can?
No.
No?
No, the FBI
completely just gone in this?
The FBI can't enforce that either. So a very relevant example of this. I'm
grasping for straws.
I know you are, but a very relevant example of this is marijuana is legal in Montana and in Colorado, but Wyoming law officers cannot have somebody in Colorado or Montana arrested for possessing marijuana and have them brought to Wyoming to be tried for it.
Right.
It's the same thing. It just, it can't happen. So prosecutors expressed significant anger at Mary's role, believing that she deliberately escalated the conflict. And some key quotes include Ken Case, who says, quote, "Shame on her. She not only didn't do anything about it, I think she provoked it," end quote.
Only shame? Oh, for shame?
Yeah, I mean, it's a press conference, so.
I know.
Frank Zaida described Mary's pursuit by Montgomery as, like I said, almost predatory, and suggesting that her actions mirrored Montgomery's obsessive behavior. Zaida's broader argument about Montgomery's predatory pursuit indirectly implicated Mary's manipulative role. And the general sentiment was covered, like the Daily Mail states, prosecutors in New York desperately searched for a reason to charge Mary Schuyler, but ultimately could find no law that she had broken, highlighting their exhaustive but fruitless efforts. I can't believe it's not fiction. What website echoes this, and that's quoted by, despite her connection to the murder, Mary hadn't broken any laws and couldn't be arrested. And it sucks, but it's true. Mary claims she continued engaging Montgomery online to prevent him from targeting other teenagers, and this was reported in the Daily Mail. In her defense, she claimed that she was keeping Montgomery online so he couldn't talk to other teenagers.
Bullshit detected. Take precautions.
I am screaming internally.
Yeah. Prosecutors dismissed this as self-serving, giving her provocative actions such as sending Jesse's underwear and videos.
And she didn't know.
Yeah, give me a freaking break. I mean, yeah,
Yes, I just screamed into them. She didn't know.
There's
She was
nothing.
not. Oh my.
Yeah, there's nothing about this that is anywhere even comes close to anything true. Like,
How am I supposed to not be?
oh, you can be angry. Everybody is angry. So despite the moral outrage, like I said, no charges were filed against this fat little toad. The Daily Beast notes that Mary planned to write a book about the dangers of the internet, suggesting that she sought to capitalize on the case rather than to accept full responsibility. And as we mentioned, Brian Barrett's family filed a civil wrongful death suit. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of Brian's estate to seek damages for his wrongful death. So, Angela, would you tell us about that civil case?
I can calm down.
It's tough in this case.
Goodness sake. Thomas Montgomery, the first defendant, a 48-year-old Cheektowaga resident. We're going to go with it.
Well, that's at the time of sentencing because he was in prison by then.
I meant go with how I pronounced it.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
we never know how
Whatever, we'll flow with it. If you're from New York and can correct us, feel free.
Yeah. Yeah, please don't take offense. Resident at the time of sentencing, convicted of manslaughter and incarcerated at Attica Correctional Facility in New York. His direct responsibility for the shooting made him the primary target, though his financial capacity to pay damages was likely limited due to imprisonment. The second, Mary Schuyler, a 45-year-old housewife from Oak Hill, Virginia. I will be nice. John will not.
I will not.
Biting his fingers over there.
Yeah.
Who confessed to posing as Talhotblond and manipulating both men online. Her actions, including sending provocative photos and taunting Montgomery, were seen as a catalyst for the murder, though she faced no criminal charges.
That's a tough one to swallow.
I-
It really is.
Okay. Dynabrade Corporation is the third, a power tool manufacturer in Clarence, New York, where the murder occurred. The company was included as a defendant, possibly due to allegations of failing to address workplace tensions or ensure employee safety, given workers' awareness of the rivalry. The lawsuit was likely filed in the New York State Supreme Court, Erie County civil term, as this is the trial level court for civil cases in the county where the murder occurred. Per the New York State Unified Court System structure, the Buffalo News mentions the lawsuit in the context of Montgomery's criminal case, which was also in Erie County Supreme Court, suggesting the civil case followed suit. Under New York law, you're going to make me read this.
No, you don't have to read that part.
Under New York law, a wrongful death lawsuit allows a deceased person's estate to seek damages for losses caused by an unlawful death, such as funeral expenses, lost financial support, and emotional suffering. The Barrett family likely claimed that Montgomery's intentional act of shooting Brian, Schuyler's provocation, and Dynabrade's negligence directly caused Brian's death. And I likely agree with that.
I do. I agree with all of it, actually.
Yeah. Montgomery's liability as the shooter. Montgomery's liability was clear with evidence including his guilty plea, DNA on a peach pit, and chat logs showing intent. The same quote, Brian will pay in blood. The civil claim would seek to hold him financially accountable, though his incarceration limited his ability to pay. Still just
Yeah.
the family. That's how much it pisses me off, folks. The family argued that Schuyler's actions, creating a false persona, flirting with both men, and publicly humiliating Montgomery, contributed to the murder. Lockport Journal quotes District Attorney Frank Clark stating Schuyler's actions were not criminal in New York, but civil liability has lower threshold. Preponderance of evidence versus beyond a reasonable doubt. The lawsuit likely alleged negligence or intentional infliction of emotional distress, claiming her manipulation foreseeably escalating tension. The inclusion of Dinah Braid suggests claims of negligence such as failing to supervise employees or address the known rivalry. New York Times notes that coworkers reported the love triangle, indicating that Dinah Braid may have been aware of tensions. The lawsuit might have argued that the company should have intervened and provided better security in the parking lot where the murder occurred. Agreed?
Yep.
Although I couldn't find detail, or John couldn't find detail, I'm giving him credit, people. Although John couldn't find detail, it likely included why can't I say that word? Why can't I say that word?
Compensatory.
Damages for Brian's funeral costs, lost future earnings. There's so many words I can say. As a student aspiring to be a teacher, and the family's emotional pain, as well as possible punitive damages against Montgomery and Schuyler for their egregious conduct. The Buffalo News states that the Barrett family was, quote, now suing Montgomery, Schuyler, and Dinah Braid over wrongful death, end quote, during Montgomery's sentencing on November 27, 2007. Suggesting the lawsuit was filed around or before this date. The exact filing date is not specified, but it likely followed the criminal case's resolution to leverage evidence from the investigation, such as chat logs and Montgomery's plea. The sources do not provide specific details about the civil trial proceedings, such as hearing dates, witness testimony, or motions filed. Unlike the criminal case, which was well documented due to its high-profile nature and media coverage, like Talhotblond documentary, the civil case received less attention, likely because it was less sensational or settled out of court. John also could not find the final outcome of the wrongful death lawsuit, such as a verdict, settlement amount, or dismissal. This gap is notable given the case's prominence, but several factors and inferences provide insight. The Buffalo News, Lockport Journal, and other sources mention the lawsuit, but do not report a trial verdict or judgment, unlike the detailed coverage of Montgomery's criminal sentencing. The New York official reports and fine law databases which cover New York Supreme Court decisions do not list a published opinion for this case, suggesting it did not result in a significant report ruling. This implies the case was either settled out of court, dismissed, or not publicly reported.
As a corporation, Dinah Braid had the financial capacity to settle, unlike Montgomery, who was incarcerated, or Schuyler, who was a fat little housewife. Wrongful deaths lawsuits often target employers for deeper pockets, and Dinah Braid may have settled to avoid litigation costs or negative publicity, especially given the case's media attention. And like I said, a lot of that comes from that Talhotblond documentary, which is it's really a good documentary. The access that they had, because they interviewed the dumbass dweeb from prison in that.
Really?
Yeah. Quite a bit of it is interviews with him. They were able to interview, like I said, Jesse's dad. He was interviewed in that.
I think I'm going to watch it.
It's good. I think you have to purchase it on Amazon, but I think it's pretty cheap. It's like $2.99 or something like that to buy it. So, but it's actually a pretty good documentary. It's done really well. And so I would recommend it for anybody that's interested in learning more about this case, because they do a good job. And settlements are common in civil cases and are typically confidential. So that would explain the lack of public records. Schuyler's inclusion in the lawsuit faced challenges due to her West Virginia residence and her limited assets. She had nothing. The Barrett family may have secured a nominal settlement or judgment against her, but her financial constraints and lack of criminal liability likely reduced her exposure. The Daily Mail notes her personal fallout. She was divorced and estranged from Jesse, suggesting that she had limited resources to pay damages. I believe, and this is just pulled from my memory, so if I'm wrong, forgive me, but I believe that she moved back home with her parents after
Mary did?
Yeah.
I heard the same thing.
Yeah, because, I mean, she's worthless.
She was ruined, yeah.
Yeah, and she's
ruined
worthless.
herself, but
she has no motivation. I mean, pictures of the woman, and I realize, I have no problem being mean and derogatory towards murderers and creeps. So
Yeah.
I don't apologize for calling her names because she deserves it. But there is a reason behind it. And it is the person that she is disgusting to me.
We drag the creeps here.
Absolutely. Unapologetically.
Yeah.
But, pictures of her, you can just tell from looking at her. She just has no drive, no motivation, no nothing. She probably still isn't working. She probably is. Mommy and daddy are probably still taking care of her, honestly.
If she was working, could they go to her taxes to pay for some of this?
If they got a judgment, which we don't know, but if they got a judgment, then yeah, they could garnish her wages. They could,
So she probably
take her assets to pay
stay
it
away
off.
from it because of that.
And that's very likely as well.
Let's just drain mommy and daddy now.
And we don't know. None of this is, is proof. It's just us speculating. But I think it's a pretty good guess. But I'm pretty sure that documentary did say that she moved home with her parents. But, this was a long damn time ago. So I don't know what she's doing now. Maybe she died. I don't know anything about her, how she ended up, because there's nothing there. Montgomery's conviction made his liability certain, but his incarceration likely lack of assets would have made collecting damages difficult, if not completely impossible. The family may have obtained a default judgment, like you were talking about, against him. And if he did not respond to the lawsuit, but recovery would be minimal unless he had significant assets. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he's out now. So maybe if they got a judgment, maybe they're able to garnish his wages and collect something. I hope they do, because I want his life to be as miserable as possible.
Yeah.
The most likely outcome is that the Barrett family reached a confidential settlement with Dynabrade, possibly covering the funeral cost, lost earnings, and emotional damages. The absence of reported verdicts in any of the news sources does support this, as settlements often avoid public disclosure. Dynabrade's potential negligence, which I do agree that they were negligent, but it definitely provided leverage for the settlement, even if it wasn't legally airtight. But it was well known that this was going on at the company, and Thomas, maybe both of them, definitely Thomas should have been fired for making threats and continuing this nonsense. Maybe Brian should have been fired for some of the comments that he made as well. I'm certainly not bashing a victim. He was a 22-year-old kid, so, was something that would come out of the mouth of a 22-year-old. I'm definitely not faulting him for that, but those are comments that will get you fired in a lot of different places. So
is Dynabrade still operational?
I think so, because it's a pretty big name. Okay. It's a name that I was actually familiar with, so I'm certain that this isn't their only location in Buffalo. Because it's a pretty big company. The family likely secured a judgment against Montgomery, given his admitted guilt. But like I said before, collecting damages is completely impractical. Schuyler's role was morally culpable, but legally ambiguous in the civil context. The lawsuit may have been dropped against her due to jurisdictional issues or her inability to pay, or maybe a small settlement was reached. We just don't know. Her non-criminal status, as Clark noted, weakened the civil case compared to Montgomery's clear liability. So the New York official reports and fine law databases indicate that only selected trial court opinions are published, and this case's civil outcome was not significant enough to warrant publication. The Buffalo News' 2024 reprints of the criminal case do not mention the civil suit's resolution, reinforcing that it was likely settled quietly and possibly with conditions of, Dynabrade.
Like an NDA.
Right. So the lawsuit was partially motivated by the family's desire for accountability, especially against Schuyler, whom prosecutors blamed for provocation. Daniel Barrett's statements like, I don't wish that evil should ever walk the streets again, reflect their pursuit of justice beyond criminal case. The Daily Beast notes that the family started a petition for cybercrime laws, suggesting the civil suit was part of a broader advocacy. Any settlement or judgment likely aimed to cover tangible losses like Brian's funeral cost, which would be estimated at $5,000 to $10,000 in 2006, lost future earnings as a potential teacher, potentially $500,000 to $1 million over the course of a career, and intangible losses like emotional distress. Dinah Braid's settlement, if it occurred, would have been the primary source of that recovery. While not legally penalized, Schuyler faced significant personal fallout, including divorce and estrangement from Jesse, of whom she asked, quote, "Why don't you just get over this?" end quote,
Oh my.
at a divorce hearing. The civil suit likely compounded her social and financial strain. So obviously Montgomery was informed that the object of his desire was actually a short, fat, and pretty homely woman from West Virginia. The exact moment of this revelation likely occurred shortly after Montgomery's arrest in late September of 2006 during his police interrogations. The investigation moved quickly as detectives connected the online interactions to the motive for Barrett's murder. By contacting Mary Schuyler and her family, police confirmed that Jesse was unaware of the online persona. Mary had orchestrated the entire deception. This information was then relayed to Montgomery to clarify the dynamics of the love triangle and establish his motive of the crime. I would have loved to have been a mouse in the corner when they told him that. While specific details of Montgomery's immediate emotional reaction are not extensively documented, sources indicate that he was stunned and humiliated to learn he had been deceived. I will say in the documentary, he acts like a victim still, like it was her fault. Like, I mean, I just can't stand this guy.
Couldn't tell.
His obsession with Talhotblond had driven him to extreme jealousy and violence, and the realization that he'd been manipulated by Mary Schuyler added a layer of betrayal to his already crumbling personal life. Montgomery's marriage was, for all intents and purposes, over by this point due to his online activities, and the revelation that he had been catfished further underscored destructive consequences of his actions. I mean,
Catfish is catfish.
yeah, there's catfish in this story. It's insane. But prior to his release, Montgomery's life in prison would have been shaped by the conditions of Attica Correctional Facility, where he was initially incarcerated, and then later Wyoming Correctional Facility, where he was transferred at some point before his release. So here's an overview based on available information and the general conditions of these facilities. So Attica Correctional Facility is very well known.
Oh, yeah.
Montgomery began his sentence there, and it's a maximum security prison, known for its strict environment. So life in Attica involved routine, a highly structured schedule from wake up around 6 a.m., set meal times, and limited recreation. Inmates typically spend significant time in single occupancy cells with basic amenities like a bed, a toilet, and a sink. They're under constant supervision, frequent searches, and restricted movement due to the facility's high security status. As a convicted murderer, Montgomery may have faced social challenges within the prison hierarchy. Probably, I mean, they were probably just all over this dirtbag if they found out what he did. He was catfished by
I would love to see that too.
It would have been awesome.
All of this kind of lets him feel sniper days all over again. All the structure. Don't you see it? Come on.
Yeah, well, it's very fitting for the douchebag, if that's what you're getting at.
That's what I'm getting at. But, you know, he's just living his Marine sniper life.
Oh, yeah. So Attica had limited access to vocational training, GED courses, or counseling, depending on behavior. Montgomery, described as a churchgoer before his crime, might have engaged in religious activities, though there's no specific records to confirm this.
Oh, I bet he milked that.
Oh, I'm sure he probably did. Attica's harsh conditions, including reports of overcrowding and limited health care, could have impacted Montgomery. Hopefully it did, especially as he aged into his 60s. His mental health, strained by the Talhotblond deception and his crime, may have been a factor, though there's no documented incidents that exist. And then Wyoming Correctional, he was transferred there, and that's a medium security prison in Attica, New York. And at some point, like I said, he was sent there before his release. I don't know when. So Wyoming houses approximately 154 male offenders and focuses on rehabilitation and preparation for release. So life there would have included a much less restrictive environment compared to Attica. Wyoming offers more freedom of movement and access to programs aimed at re-entry, such as job training, substance abuse counseling, or life skills courses. Daily life would have followed a structured outline with opportunities for work assignments, recreation, and visitation. Inmates can make outgoing calls to approve contacts, subject to monitoring, of course, and they can receive mail. Though Montgomery's estrangement from his family likely limited any interactions like that. And no more underwear. No. As he approached parole eligibility, Montgomery likely participated in mandatory programs to demonstrate rehabilitation, a key factor in securing his release. His transfer to a medium security facility suggests that he was deemed lower risk as his sentence progressed. At the time of his release, Montgomery would have been around 64, 65 years old. Aging inmates often face health challenges, and while Wyoming provides basic medical care, the quality in New York prisons varies, and there's no specific health issues that are documented for Montgomery.
Other than insanity?
Yeah, definitely insanity. His crime, driven by an online love triangle and catfishing, may have made him a target for ridicule or conflict among inmates. However, his transfer to Wyoming suggests stable behavior, as medium security facilities typically house inmates with good conduct records. So, since his release, Montgomery is subject to 5 years of post-release supervision, as was mandated by his sentence. So, this period will likely extend into January of 2029, and it would involve strict conditions such as supervision, regular check-ins with a parole officer, adherence to curfews, and restrictions on travel or internet use, given the online nature of his crime. And then there would be conditions on residency and employment. Montgomery must maintain an improved residence and may be required to seek employment, though his age and criminal record could complicate job prospects. No specific details on his current location or occupation are available. He's likely in the state of New York because he is under supervision. So sometimes they're able to leave the state, but, you know, a lot of the time they're bound to that state until they complete their parole. So my guess he's still in New York. And conditions of his release likely include no contact with the victim's family or the fat toad, and limited or monitored internet access to prevent similar online behavior. There are no recent media reports or public records detailing Montgomery's activities post-release as of May 2025. Unlike high-profile cases, his case has faded from public attention, and he appears to be maintaining a low profile. His estrangement from his ex-wife and daughters, noted during his trial, suggests limited family support, which could impact his reintegration. The absence of information on violations or reincarceration implies that he is complying with parole conditions, though this is speculative without any further data. I will say that I think his likelihood of reoffending is very low. I don't think the psycho would have gone psycho if it wouldn't have been for this weird ass love triangle online fixation weirdness. And I don't think that he's a guy that is going to be out killing people again. I really don't. I could be proven wrong. And
you're not. You
never know what 20 years in prison, does to a person. But his nature and, watching the interviews with him and stuff like that, I really don't believe that he's at risk for reoffending. I think
he just shrinks into
oblivion
and just,
Yep. I mean, he's obviously a nutbag. He's obviously a loser. He's obviously all the things that I've said about him. So when I say he's not likely to reoffend, it's definitely not in support of him, because for the crime he committed, he should be locked away for life, period. But it is worth noting, I think we can sleep a little easy with this one, because, he's not like an Israel Keyes or a Jeffrey Dahmer or something like that. The chances of this guy doing this again are very slim. Mm-hmm. So after the trial of Thomas Montgomery, who, like we said, pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter of Brian Barrett in November 2007, Mary Schuyler faced significant personal fallout, but no legal consequences, as we said, as catfishing was not illegal at the time.
The court of public opinion will always get you.
Oh, yeah, and she's definitely guilty in that court.
Yep.
Her actions, posing as her daughter Jessie under the Talhotblond persona to engage in online relationships with Montgomery and Barrett, led to profound repercussions for her. Like I said, Mary's marriage to Tim Schuyler ended in divorce, like, immediately, and that was due to her deception. I mean, sources indicate that her husband was shocked by her actions, and in that movie, he is. I mean, he's like, I knew she was on the computer, and I thought it was a little weird. I'd go to give her a kiss, and she would close the lid on the computer because it was a laptop.
Red flag.
But it just he didn't realize the extent of her, so he was completely shocked, especially when it was revealed that he had used their daughter's photos, videos.
She used.
Underwear. And this also included, and I didn't mention it, but this included a video taken up her daughter's skirt clandestinely that she then used to seduce men online. So that's why I said earlier, and I kind of said throughout this whole thing, that, I mean, this was very similar to like a pedophile, to molestation. And, Jessie was violated, although not physically, she was violated in much the same way that, a child would be violated from molestation from a parent, I mean, I can't imagine what this poor girl must have thought. It was extremely hard on her. It had to be. So the divorce proceedings were marked by tension, with Mary reportedly approaching Jessie at the hearing and saying, quote, and I said this before, but it bears repeating. She says, quote, "Why don't you just get over this?" Comment that highlighted her absolute lack of remorse and strained their relationship even further. I think that it was like the straw that broke the camel's back when Jessie was like, okay, bitch, I'm done with you forever. I don't know if they've reconnected. I have no clue.
I hope not.
But likely not.
That would have earned her a throat punch if I was Jessie.
Absolutely.
Why don't you just get over that?
Yeah. Get over the fact that, I exposed your private life, your private pictures, your private everything to the world.
That we'll never take back because it's out there forever.
Well, that's just the thing. And, the really sad part about this is obviously the whole, actually doing that, sending it to these guys and that whole act. But then because Montgomery killed Brian, now it became like a huge case. They made a documentary about it. So, I mean, that had to have been like an assault on Jessie all over again. Yes.
And whoever she shared it with, that we don't know about in the story, has reshared it and reshared it, because they're probably borderline, if not pedophiles as well.
Right.
The reshare factor in this, Jessie, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, this poor girl. My heart really breaks for her dad, for Tom's daughters and his wife.
No doubt.
So many times the families of the offenders get forgotten about. We talk about the families of the victims, and we should, don't get me wrong, but, a lot of the times, I would say most of the times, the family of the offenders have no clue they're up to either. And that was definitely the case here on both sides, both Mary's family and Tom's family. Neither one of them knew what was going on. They're as much victims as anybody else in this story, Yeah. And it's just really sad.
A lot of creeps breed creeps. More often than not, it's like this.
Right.
that it's just a lot of innocence lost. A lot of innocence lost.
Absolutely. Well, Jesse, who discovered her mother's actions through a random Google search, cut off contact with Mary. This estrangement was a direct result of Mary's betrayal, and she used Jesse's identity without her consent, causing significant emotional trauma. Jesse moved to live with relatives in Virginia, like we said, while she attended college, indicating a complete break from her mother. You know, hopefully she's living a very happy life. She's a grown woman now. She's going to be, you know, in her 40s at this point, and hopefully she's successful and happy, and everything has gone well for her since this nightmare. So Mary faced widespread public condemnation for her role in this love triangle that led to Barrett's murder. Commentaries such as those on Belch Speak criticized her as manipulative and expressed frustration that she faced no legal accountability. In a statement to the BBC, Mary described her actions as, quote, stupid, and claimed she was, quote, just having fun, denying intent for the tragic outcome, which I do believe, but she expressed interest in writing a book about the dangers of the internet, like we said before, though no evidence suggests that the project materialized. And again, I don't think that she has enough drive and ambition to do anything, so I don't think there's much fear of that. But the fact that this bitch wants to capitalize on this, on the tragedy of Brian's murder, is disgusting. There's no recent update on Mary's whereabouts or her activities as of May 2025, suggesting that she's maintained a low profile. Some sources note her home in Oak Hill, West Virginia was demolished in March 2023, though the reason for that is unclear. It was likely not tied to this case, as there would be no reason, you know. It's not like anything happened at that house.
Well,
yeah, I think it's more sweet than bitter, honestly, but you know, it's not like it was the John Wayne Gacy house or something like that, you know, so I don't think it was tied to the case at all.
Just another nail in the coffin of pain.
Right. So some sources, like Belch Speak, claim Mary's maiden name is Mary Daly Schuyler. Most reports refer to her as Mary Schuyler. A 2016 obituary for a Maylie Yvonne Schuyler from West Virginia. I think it's unrelated to this case, but it did cause some confusion. But there's no evidence that this Mary Schuyler, the Talhotblond Mary Schuyler, has passed away. So I don't know where she ended up.
See that. Yeah.
Tim Schuyler, her husband, was kind of a peripheral figure in this case, but he was deeply affected by the revelations. Tim divorced Mary after her confession to the police about posing as Jesse online. Sources describe him as a nice, good-hearted person. That's the impression I got of him. And he was absolutely blindsided by this bitch's actions. His decision to divorce was driven by the betrayal and public humiliation caused by her deception. And I think most of all, it was because of her use of their daughter's identity.
Run fast, run far, Tim.
Absolutely. Little is known about his life after the divorce. He appears to have distanced himself from the public eye. I can't blame him for that. No sources provide details on his subsequent activities, his residence, any relationships. His primary role in the narrative is as a victim of Mary's actions, and he likely sought to rebuild his life privately, possibly remaining in West Virginia, or maybe he relocated to be closer to his daughter in Virginia. We just don't know. It wasn't explicitly detailed in any of the sources. I'm pretty sure that Jesse and Tim maintained contact. And I say that just based on that documentary. They do appear in the documentary, although Jesse doesn't talk and her face is blurred out and stuff in the documentary. But she is with her father, and it's made pretty clear that they have a relationship once she was certain that he had part of this, had no knowledge of it or anything like that. So now Jesse, the real person whose identity Mary used as Talhotblond, was obviously an unwitting victim of her mother's actions, and she suffered significant emotional fallout. Jessie learned, like we said, of her mother's deception through a Google search, and that revealed that her mother had used her photos, videos, and underwear to catfish men online. This betrayal led Jessie to cut her off, and that decision was definitely reinforced by Mary's dismissive comment at the divorce hearing. So, like we said, she moved to Virginia. The public exposure of her mother's actions combined with the misuse of her image and her identity likely caused significant trauma. Sources note that Jessie was horrified and felt obviously betrayed, as she had no knowledge of the online relationships until the police investigation. So her decision to relocate suggests an attempt to escape the stigma and to rebuild her life. There's no recent updates as of May 2025 that detail Jessie's life post-college. She has likely maintained a private life, avoiding public attention due to the high-profile nature of the case. Sources speculate that she didn't get over the betrayal, indicating lasting emotional scars, but no specific information confirms her current residence, her career, or her personal life.
She did just get over it. I would like to talk to how strong she is.
Yeah.
And
nobody's going to just get over something like that. It just isn't going to happen. And then the family of Brian Barrett, the 22-year-old victim that was murdered by Thomas Montgomery, they faced profound grief and sought justice in the aftermath. Brian's parents described in sources as being devastated. They lost their son to a senseless act, driven by an online love triangle. Brian, like we said, was portrayed as bright, hardworking, and an accomplished high school athlete who coached Little League and was attending Buffalo State College.
Kids, too.
Oh, yeah. His death in September 2006, where he was shot 3 times with a military rifle in a parking lot, left his family grappling with immense sorrow. In response to Brian's death and Mary Schuyler's role in the events, his parents started a petition to advocate for laws to protect against similar online deceptions. They aim to address the lack of legal recourse against individuals like the Fat Toad, who, while not directly committing the murder, contributed to the circumstances that led to it. However, sources note that there was no clear indication of what such laws would entail, and no significant legislative changes have been reported as of 2025. I will say that Trump just signed an executive order that deals with a lot of this stuff, and I think that she could have been charged for that federally at this time.
Where is this petition and how do I sign? Because
I think it's done at this point. But so beyond their advocacy, little is documented about the Barrett family's personal lives after the trial. They likely continued to mourn Brian's loss privately, and no updates detail their current activities or their residence. The case's publicity, including the Talhotblond documentary and media coverage, may have kept their grief in the public eye, complicating their ability to move forward.
Just say,
sure.
Documentaries that are made in cases like this, I think should have to give a percentage of their, you know the word I'm looking for.
Profits?
Thank you. To police.
I think it would be great if they did.
I think they should have to.
Yeah, I think it would be great if they did. A lot of the time, if they appear in the documentary, they get paid, and depending on the documentary, sometimes they're paid quite well. So I hope that was the case here. I don't know. It was definitely a lower budget production. So I don't know how big of a budget they had, but hopefully they got paid at least for participating.
Even documentaries where they don't participate, people are still benefiting off their stories, so they should.
100%.
They should still get some.
100%. I do really like the laws, or the states that have laws against the perpetrators being able to profit from their story. Not all states have that law.
My mind.
Yeah, not all states have that law, but every state should have that law. So the Talhotblond case is a tragedy that reverberates far beyond the headlines, leaving a trail of shattered lives and unanswered questions. At heart is Brian Barrett, a 22-year-old with a bright future, athletic, kind, and genuine, a young man who coached Little League and studied at Buffalo State College. Brian's life was stolen in a parking lot on September 15th, 2006, gunned down by Thomas Montgomery, a man consumed by jealousy over an online fantasy. Brian's family, the loss was unimaginable. Parents who once cheered at his games and dreamed of his future were left with only memories and a void that no justice could fill. Their grief fueled a fight for laws to protect against online deception, a desperate plea to ensure no other family endures their pain. Brian wasn't just a victim. He was a son, brother, friend, someone whose light was extinguished too soon, leaving his loved ones to navigate a world forever dimmed. Jesse Schuyler, too, carries scars from this tragedy. A beautiful 18-year-old high school senior, she was betrayed by the one person who was meant to protect her, her mother, Mary Schuyler. She used Jesse's photos, videos, and even personal items to craft the Talhotblond persona, catfishing men like Montgomery without Jesse's knowledge. When Jesse discovered the truth through a random Google search, her world collapsed. Violation of her identity, coupled with Mary's callous dismissal of, "Why don't you just get over this?" drove Jesse to cut ties and flee to Virginia. Seeking solace with relatives, her trust was shattered, her privacy exploited, leaving her to rebuild amidst public scrutiny, private pain. Families of Thomas Montgomery and Mary Schuyler were also torn apart. Montgomery's wife and daughters faced the wreckage of his deception and crime. His marriage crumbled when his wife uncovered his online persona, and his daughters, once prepared to defend him, were left grappling with their father's actions. Montgomery, released on parole in January 2024 after serving 16 years, now lives under supervision, but his family's wounds will never fully heal. Mary's husband, Tim, forced her after her betrayal, humiliated by her actions. Mary herself, punished by law, but ostracized by her community and estranged from Jesse, became a symbol of the havoc unchecked deception can wreak. This case is a stark warning for all of us that navigate the online world. The internet offers connection, but it can also be a mask for deceit. Be cautious of who you trust in digital spaces. Verify identities. Question intentions. Protect your personal information. Behind every screen is a human story, and as Brian and Jesse's lives show, those stories can turn tragic when fantasy blurs with reality. Let's honor their pain by staying vigilant, fostering genuine connections, remembering that consequences of our online actions ripple far beyond the keyboard. So as we close this episode of Dark Dialogue, our hearts ache for Brian Barrett, a young man whose life was stolen by a web of lies, and for Jesse Schuyler, whose trust was shattered by betrayal. Their stories and the grief of their families remind us why we tell these tales, not just to uncover the darkness, but to amplify the voices of those silenced by it.
That's our mission here at Dark Dialogue, John. We give voices to the voiceless. People like Brian. Dreams were cut short. Jesse, whose identity was stolen. Sharing their stories, we hope to spread awareness, inspire caution, and keep their humanity alive in our hearts. We ask you, listeners, to carry these lessons forward, to question the shadows online, and to hold space for those who suffer.
So, Dark Dialogue listeners, this is where we leave you tonight, in a dark and lonely parking lot where a madman waits in the shadow, clutching his gun and his delusions of being more important instead of the worthless nobody that he was, chasing the affections of someone as crazy and worthless as him. For Brian, Jesse, and the innocent families, and for every victim of online crimes, asking, keep listening, keep their light alive. If you like what we do and how we do it, give us a like, a thumbs up, and a follow. You can't imagine how much that means to us and how much it helps. Consider becoming a supporter on Patreon or on Ko-fi, helping us to continue to do this work. Follow us and stay up to date on social media, and feel free to reach out there or to our email at info@darkdialogue.com with questions, critiques, or case suggestions. Until next time, this is John.
This is Anna. Stay safe, stay connected, keep seeking the truth, keep